Not every mystery fades with time. Some remain suspended between evidence and impossibility, quietly resisting every attempt to explain them. A cryptic transmission, an empty scene that defies logic, a discovery no expert can fully decode. Each carries an unsettling weight. Tonight, we explore 15 terrifying, unexplained mysteries that still haunt human understanding. So dim the lights, keep your curiosity close, and let us step beyond certainty. Morning mist settles over the weathered stones of a medieval fortress, where narrow passageways echo with centuries of silence. Beneath vaulted chambers and hidden storerooms, legends speak of chests that vanished without a trace, filled not only with gold and silver, but perhaps with objects considered priceless beyond measure. For more than 700 years, the missing treasure of the Knights Templar has remained one of history's most enduring mysteries. The Knights Templar began as a small military order in the early 12th century, created to protect Christian pilgrims traveling through the Holy Land. Over time, their influence expanded far beyond the battlefield. They established a network of fortresses, managed vast estates across Europe, and developed financial practices that resembled an early international banking system. Kings borrowed from them, nobles entrusted them with wealth. Their resources grew to extraordinary levels, making the order both respected and feared. Yet prosperity often attracts suspicion. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the sudden arrest of hundreds of Templars throughout his kingdom. They faced accusations ranging from heresy to secret rituals and corruption. Many historians believe the charges were driven largely by politics and debt, as the French crown owed enormous sums to the order. Under pressure from Philip, Pope Clement V eventually dissolved the Templars, bringing one of medieval Europe's most powerful organizations to an abrupt end. But amid the arrests, another question quietly emerged. Where had the Templars' wealth gone? Contemporary records suggest that when royal officials searched the Templar headquarters in Paris, they expected to find substantial riches. Instead, they reportedly discovered far less than anticipated. If the order truly possessed enormous financial resources, why were its vaults not overflowing? Had the treasure been exaggerated over generations, or had someone moved it before the arrests began? One account claims that shortly before the crackdown, a convoy of wagons departed Paris under unusual circumstances. Another tradition describes a small fleet of Templar ships leaving the port of La Rochelle, disappearing into the Atlantic before royal forces could seize them. While surviving evidence for these stories is limited and debated, they have inspired centuries of speculation. If valuables were transported away in secret, where were they taken? Scotland has long occupied a special place in these theories. Because King Robert the Bruce had been excommunicated at the time, some suggest that fleeing Templars may have found refuge there. Legends connect them to remote chapels, isolated castles, and hidden vaults concealed beneath rugged landscapes. The famous Rosslyn Chapel is frequently mentioned, although no conclusive evidence has linked it to any missing Templar treasure. Others look toward Portugal, where many former Templars became members of the newly established Order of Christ. Since the transition allowed numerous Templar properties to remain active under a different name, some researchers wonder whether portions of the Order's wealth simply continued under new administration rather than disappearing at all. Then there are the more extraordinary possibilities. According to some traditions, the treasure was never primarily about precious metals. Instead, it may have included sacred manuscripts, religious relics, or ancient artifacts collected during the Templars' years in Jerusalem. Stories have linked the missing cache to the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, and long-lost texts capable of reshaping accepted history. No credible archaeological evidence has confirmed these claims, yet they continue to inspire books, documentaries, and expeditions across multiple continents. Perhaps the greatest mystery lies in the contrast between documented history and enduring legend. Historians generally agree that much of the Templars' true wealth existed not as piles of gold, but as land, legal rights, financial agreements, and infrastructure spread across Europe. Even so, the absence of a clear accounting for certain assets leaves room for unanswered questions. Was there ever a single hidden treasure? Or did later generations weave scattered facts into a larger legend? Centuries have passed since the Templars disappeared. Yet beneath ruined keeps, forgotten tunnels, and ancient stone foundations, the search quietly continues. Whether the missing treasure was material wealth, sacred knowledge, or simply a story enlarged by time, one question remains suspended between history and imagination. Somewhere beneath layers of earth and memory, could a final secret still be waiting to be uncovered? If the vanished wealth of the Knights Templar reminds us that history can conceal remarkable secrets, the next mystery suggests that it can also obscure the fate of a king. Sometimes the greatest puzzle is not what disappeared, but whether someone truly vanished at all. High above the rolling countryside of Western England, thick stone walls rise from the landscape at Berkeley Castle. Time has softened their sharp edges, but the fortress still carries an unmistakable sense of permanence. Narrow windows admit only slivers of daylight, while winding corridors lead to chambers that have witnessed triumph, betrayal, and imprisonment. Among these ancient rooms rests one of medieval England's most enduring mysteries, the uncertain fate of King Edward II. For generations, visitors have stood within these walls, imagining the final days of the deposed monarch. Official history tells one story, contemporary rumors tell another. Later discoveries raise entirely different possibilities. More than 7 centuries later, historians continue to debate a question that refuses to settle. What truly happened to Edward II? Edward became King of England in 1307 following the death of his father, Edward I, one of the country's most formidable rulers. Expectations were immense, but Edward's reign quickly became troubled. Military setbacks, political disagreements, and his close relationships with several royal favourites strained his authority. Many powerful nobles viewed his decisions with increasing frustration, believing the kingdom was being governed through personal loyalties rather than careful leadership. Tensions eventually reached a breaking point. In 1326, Queen Isabella, accompanied by her ally Roger Mortimer, launched an invasion of England. Support for Edward collapsed with surprising speed. Captured while attempting to escape, the king was forced to abdicate in favour of his young son, who would become Edward III. The once powerful monarch was reduced to a prisoner, moved between secure locations before finally arriving at Berkeley Castle. At first glance, the historical record appears straightforward. Most chronicles report that Edward died at Berkeley Castle on September 21, 1327. His body was later displayed publicly before burial at Gloucester Abbey, allowing observers to confirm the king's identity. Official documents recorded his death, and the transition of royal authority continued without interruption. Yet certainty begins to fade upon closer inspection. The earliest reports describing Edward's death offer remarkably few details. Later chroniclers expanded the story dramatically, introducing claims that he had been secretly murdered to prevent any future attempts at restoration. The most infamous version describes an execution designed to leave no visible injuries, a tale so disturbing that it has echoed through literature and popular culture for centuries. Modern historians, however, largely regard this particular account with caution. It appeared years after the alleged event, often in sources influenced by political agendas or shaped by repeated retelling. No contemporary evidence conclusively supports the grisly details that later became so widely accepted. If the famous murder story cannot be firmly verified, what actually happened inside Berkeley Castle? One possibility is remarkably ordinary. Edward may simply have died from illness or the harsh conditions of imprisonment. Medieval castles were cold, damp, and often unhealthy environments. Disease spread easily, and medical knowledge remained limited. For many scholars, this explanation requires the fewest assumptions, but another possibility has fascinated researchers for generations. What if Edward never died at Berkeley Castle at all? The foundation for this alternative theory rests largely upon a remarkable document known today as the Fieschi letter, written several years after Edward's reported death by an Italian cleric named Manuel Fieschi. The letter presents an extraordinary narrative. According to its account, Edward escaped imprisonment with the assistance of sympathizers after a substitute body was presented in his place. Rather than dying in captivity, the former king supposedly traveled across Europe, living quietly as a pilgrim before eventually settling as a religious hermit. At first, the story seems almost impossible to believe. Yet, historians have debated the document for decades because it contains a mixture of information that is both surprisingly accurate and deeply puzzling. Some details correspond closely with known historical events, while others cannot be independently confirmed. Was the author repeating reliable testimony from informed sources? Had he been deliberately misled, or was he constructing a carefully crafted political narrative? The questions multiply rather than disappear. Adding further intrigue is an event recorded during the reign of Edward III. Several years after his father's reported death, a man known as William the Welshman appeared before the king, claiming to be Edward II himself. Instead of reacting with immediate outrage, Edward III reportedly arranged for the man to receive respectful treatment before quietly removing him from public attention. Who was this mysterious individual? Some historians believe he was simply an impostor, hoping to gain favor or financial support. Medieval Europe saw numerous false claimants emerge whenever uncertainty surrounded a ruler's death. Others wonder whether the unusually measured response suggests the claim could not be dismissed quite so easily. The surviving records leave room for interpretation. Meanwhile, Berkeley Castle itself has become woven into the mystery. Certain rooms have long been associated with Edward's imprisonment, although identifying the precise location remains difficult. Over centuries, stories accumulated within the castle walls, blending historical memory with local tradition. Visitors often remark on the silence of these chambers, where stone surfaces have absorbed generations of whispered speculation. History frequently works this way. Documents disappear, witnesses contradict one another, political motives influence official accounts. As years become centuries, certainty slowly gives way to possibility. Most modern scholars continue to accept that Edward II probably died in captivity during 1327, considering it the explanation best supported by the available evidence. Yet they also acknowledge that important questions remain unanswered. The exact circumstances of his death cannot be reconstructed with complete confidence, and documents like the Fieschi letter ensure that alternative interpretations continue to receive careful examination. Perhaps that is why Edward II's story has never faded. It is not merely a question of whether a king survived imprisonment. It is a reminder that even events involving crowns, castles, and royal ceremonies can leave behind surprising gaps in the historical record. We often imagine the lives of monarchs as meticulously documented. Yet, this episode demonstrates how fragile certainty can become when evidence is incomplete. As daylight fades across Berkeley Castle and long shadows stretch through its empty halls, the ancient stones reveal nothing. They neither confirm the official account nor deny the possibility that a fallen king slipped quietly into anonymity. Somewhere between documented history and enduring legend, the final chapter of Edward II's life remains just beyond our reach, inviting us to wonder whether one of England's greatest royal mysteries is still waiting to be fully understood. If the uncertain fate of a medieval king reminds us that even royal lives can disappear into the shadows of history, our next mystery takes that uncertainty even further. This time the question is not how a ruler died, but where one of the most powerful men who ever lived was finally laid to rest. The Mongolian steppe stretches beyond the horizon in every direction, an immense landscape where rolling grasslands merge with distant mountains beneath an endless sky. The wind moves freely across this vast terrain, carrying little more than the sound of grazing horses and the quiet rustle of wild grasses. It is a place that appears almost untouched by time. Yet somewhere beneath this seemingly endless wilderness, many believe one of history's greatest secrets remains concealed. The final resting place of Genghis Khan has never been found. Few individuals have altered the course of world history as dramatically as Genghis Khan. Born as Temujin around 1162, he united the scattered Mongol tribes and forged an empire unlike anything the medieval world had witnessed. His armies crossed immense distances with remarkable speed, reshaping political boundaries from East Asia to Eastern Europe. By the time of his death in 1227, the Mongol Empire had become the largest contiguous land empire in recorded history. Despite the enormous influence of the man himself, one of the most basic questions surrounding his life has never been answered with certainty. Where is he buried? Unlike many rulers whose elaborate tombs became monuments to their achievements, Genghis Khan appears to have vanished almost completely after death. No confirmed mausoleum exists. No royal monument identifies his grave. No archaeological excavation has uncovered remains that can be confidently attributed to the Mongol conqueror. For historians, this absence is remarkable. The earliest written accounts suggest that secrecy surrounded his burial from the very beginning. According to later chronicles, Genghis Khan requested a simple and private burial in accordance with certain Mongol traditions. His funeral procession reportedly traveled in silence, carrying his body toward an undisclosed location somewhere within his homeland. From this point onward, history begins to blur into legend. One of the most enduring traditions claims that everyone who witnessed the burial was killed to preserve its secrecy. The soldiers who carried out those executions were themselves allegedly eliminated by another group, ensuring that no living person knew the exact location of the grave. Some versions continue even further, describing horses driven repeatedly across the burial site until every trace disappeared into the surrounding landscape. These stories have become deeply rooted in popular imagination. Yet historians caution that contemporary evidence supporting such dramatic details is limited. Many accounts appeared generations after Genghis Khan's death, making it difficult to separate historical memory from evolving folklore. Still, the central mystery remains. Somewhere, a burial took place. The question is where? For centuries, researchers have focused their attention on the Kentiai Mountains of northeastern Mongolia. This rugged region holds deep cultural significance and is widely believed to be connected to Genghis Khan's early life. Dense forests blanket the slopes while rivers carve winding paths through isolated valleys. Even today, large portions of the landscape remain sparsely populated and difficult to explore. One particular location, frequently mentioned, is Burkhan Khaldun, a sacred mountain closely associated with Genghis Khan in historical sources. According to the secret history of the Mongols, the mountain served as a place of refuge during his youth, and later became spiritually important throughout his life. Because of these connections, many scholars consider the surrounding region one of the strongest candidates for his burial. Yet Burkhan Khaldun presents unique challenges. Much of the area has long been protected, both out of cultural respect and environmental preservation. Archaeological excavation is limited, and many local communities believe the mountain should remain undisturbed. Their view reflects a long-standing tradition that honoring the memory of Genghis Khan sometimes means leaving his resting place exactly as it was intended, hidden from human curiosity. Modern technology has offered new possibilities without disturbing the ground. Researchers have employed satellite imagery, aerial photography, drone surveys, and ground-penetrating radar to search for subtle signs beneath the surface. International projects have analyzed thousands of square kilometers, looking for unusual earthworks, ancient roads, or forgotten structures concealed beneath vegetation. So far, however, no discovery has provided definitive proof. Every promising anomaly eventually raises more questions than answers. Some historians argue that the expectation of a grand royal tomb may itself be misleading. Unlike the elaborate burial complexes of Egyptian pharaohs or Chinese emperors, the grave of Genghis Khan may have been intentionally modest. If so, centuries of erosion, vegetation, and natural geological change could have erased nearly every visible clue. Others suggest the burial site may never have contained monumental architecture at all. This possibility makes the search especially difficult. An ordinary grave placed within an immense landscape could remain invisible for centuries, even with modern equipment. Beyond historical investigation lies another layer of speculation. Some traditions describe a hidden chamber filled with extraordinary treasures: gold, weapons, ceremonial armor, precious textiles, and objects gathered during the Mongol conquests. Similar stories surround many famous rulers throughout history, reflecting humanity's enduring fascination with lost wealth. Yet, no reliable evidence confirms that such riches accompanied Genghis Khan into death. Another theory proposes that the greatest treasure is not material but historical. If the tomb were ever discovered intact, it might preserve artifacts capable of revealing details about Mongol culture, burial customs, military organization, and daily life that written records have never captured. The value of such knowledge could surpass any collection of precious metals. Then there are the legends that drift even further beyond conventional history. Some local stories speak of supernatural guardians protecting the burial site. Others describe sacred landscapes that conceal themselves from outsiders, revealing their secrets only to those chosen by fate. These accounts belong to oral tradition rather than historical evidence, yet they illustrate how deeply the mystery has become woven into Mongolian cultural memory. Interestingly, many archaeologists express little urgency to solve the mystery at any cost. Across the world, attitudes toward excavation have evolved. Increasingly, scholars recognize that certain burial places carry profound cultural and spiritual significance. In the case of Genghis Khan, preserving the wishes traditionally attributed to him may be considered as important as satisfying historical curiosity. Perhaps this is why the mystery continues to endure. The search is no longer simply about locating a grave. It has become a conversation about memory, respect, and the limits of historical discovery. Must every secret eventually be uncovered, or do some places gain their meaning precisely because they remain beyond our reach? As evening settles across the Mongolian steppe and shadows lengthen beneath distant mountain ridges, the landscape offers no answers. Somewhere beneath those endless horizons, or perhaps somewhere no one has yet imagined, the final resting place of Genghis Khan may still lie undisturbed, silently keeping a secret that has survived for nearly 8 centuries. If the hidden tomb of Genghis Khan reminds us that some landscapes guard their secrets with remarkable patience, our next mystery concerns something far less tangible. Instead of searching for a lost grave beneath the earth, we follow the invisible trail of a catastrophe that transformed civilizations, yet whose true beginning remains surprisingly difficult to pinpoint. High in the mountains of Central Asia, narrow valleys wind between snow-covered peaks, where alpine lakes reflect a sky that seems almost untouched by time. Ancient trade routes once threaded through these rugged landscapes, linking distant kingdoms with caravans carrying silk, spices, metals, livestock, and ideas. Travelers crossed these passes for centuries, often leaving little more than footprints behind. Yet somewhere along these forgotten pathways, an unseen passenger may have begun one of the deadliest events in recorded history. The Black Death changed the medieval world forever. Between 1346 and 1353, the pandemic swept across Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and large parts of Asia, claiming the lives of tens of millions of people. Entire communities disappeared. Thriving towns fell silent. Trade networks collapsed. Labor shortages reshaped economies, and social structures that had existed for generations were suddenly thrown into uncertainty. The devastation itself is well documented. Its true point of origin is not. For centuries, historians, archaeologists, and epidemiologists have searched for the earliest traces of the disease. Modern science has answered many questions about how the Black Death spread, identifying the bacterium Yersinia pestis as the primary cause. The disease circulated among rodent populations with fleas, serving as important vectors that carried the infection to humans under certain conditions. Yet, discovering the pathogen explains only part of the story. Where did the particular outbreak that became the Black Death actually begin? For generations, many scholars pointed toward East Asia. Medieval chronicles described devastating epidemics affecting regions connected by the vast trade networks of the Mongol Empire during the early 14th century. Since commerce linked cities across thousands of miles, diseases could travel with merchants, soldiers, animals, and caravans moving between continents. The Mongol Empire, while creating unprecedented connections between distant societies, may also have unintentionally provided ideal pathways for infectious diseases. This explanation remains influential, but recent discoveries have introduced a fascinating new possibility. In the mountains of present-day Kyrgyzstan, archaeologists have long studied medieval cemeteries near Lake Issyk-Kul. Some gravestones dating to 1338 and 1339 contain inscriptions mentioning death caused by a mysterious pestilence. For decades, these inscriptions attracted scholarly interest, but they offered only limited clues. Then advances in ancient DNA transformed the investigation. Scientists successfully extracted genetic material from the teeth of individuals buried in these cemeteries. Analysis revealed the presence of Yersinia pestis. Even more remarkably, The recovered strain appears closely related to the ancestral lineage from which the strains responsible for the Black Death later emerged. For many researchers, this represents some of the strongest evidence yet for identifying the pandemic's immediate origins. Even so, important questions remain. Did the outbreak truly begin there, or do the cemeteries simply preserve one early chapter of a much larger story already unfolding elsewhere? Many specialists emphasize that diseases rarely emerge from a single dramatic moment. Instead, pathogens often circulate quietly among wildlife populations for centuries before environmental changes create opportunities for wider transmission. This leads investigators toward the remarkable ecology of Central Asia. The region is home to populations of marmots and other wild rodents known to carry Yersinia pestis. Even today, natural plague reservoirs continue to exist in several parts of the world where the bacterium survives among animal hosts without causing global pandemics. Under specific environmental conditions, however, these localized infections can occasionally spread into new species, including humans.
Could unusual climate patterns have altered animal populations? Did shifting trade routes bring infected rodents closer to expanding commercial networks? Or did increasing movement across Eurasia simply allow an ancient bacterium to reach populations with little natural resistance? Each possibility adds another layer to the mystery. Climate researchers have contributed additional perspectives. By examining tree rings, lake sediments, and other environmental records, scientists have reconstructed weather patterns from the medieval period. Some studies suggest that fluctuations in temperature and rainfall may have influenced rodent populations, creating ecological conditions favorable for plague outbreaks. These findings are intriguing, but they do not provide a complete explanation. Nature rarely follows a single cause. Human behavior also played a crucial role. Bustling marketplaces, crowded cities, expanding maritime trade, military campaigns, and interconnected caravan routes created opportunities for diseases to travel farther and faster than ever before. What began as a localized outbreak, wherever it first appeared, could rapidly become an international catastrophe. One famous episode illustrates this interconnected world. In 1346, during the siege of the Genoese trading port of Kaffa on the Crimean Peninsula, contemporary accounts describe an epidemic spreading among the attacking forces. A later chronicler claimed that infected bodies were hurled over the city walls, potentially exposing defenders to disease. While historians continue to debate the accuracy and significance of this account, many agree that maritime trade from Black Sea ports helped carry plague into Mediterranean ports shortly afterward. From there, the disease advanced with astonishing speed. Ships reached Sicily. Merchants entered bustling harbors. Caravans continued their journeys. Within only a few years, much of Europe faced a crisis unlike anything in living memory. Beyond mainstream research, more speculative ideas have emerged over the centuries. Some earlier writers proposed that the Black Death resulted from unusual astronomical events, claiming that planetary alignments or comets somehow poisoned the atmosphere. Medieval physicians themselves often believed that corrupted air, known as miasma, contributed to disease. Although these explanations have been rejected by modern science, they reveal how people struggled to understand an invisible threat long before bacteria were discovered. Other fringe theories suggest the pandemic may have involved unknown biological factors or entirely different pathogens acting alongside Yersinia pestis. While researchers continue to examine whether multiple diseases may have circulated simultaneously during certain outbreaks, current genetic and archaeological evidence strongly supports plague as the principal cause of the Black Death. Even with modern laboratories and sophisticated technology, the investigation continues. Each newly excavated cemetery, each fragment of ancient DNA, and each forgotten historical document has the potential to reshape what scholars believe they know. Scientific understanding has advanced enormously over recent decades. Yet, the complete sequence of events leading to the pandemic remains remarkably complex. Perhaps the mystery endures because origins are rarely as simple as they appear. History often encourages us to search for a single starting point, a precise place, a single date, or one defining event. But pandemics emerge through countless interactions between nature, climate, wildlife, human societies, and chance. The Black Death may not have begun with one isolated incident, but with a chain of circumstances stretching across landscapes and cultures long before anyone realized what was unfolding. As evening settles over the mountain passes of Central Asia, and cold winds sweep across ancient caravan routes, the silence offers few clues. Somewhere among forgotten settlements, weathered gravestones, and the hidden ecology of the natural world lies the beginning of a story that reshaped human civilization. Whether every chapter of that story will ever be reconstructed remains an open question, inviting us to wonder how many secrets the past still keeps beyond the reach of certainty. If tracing the origins of the Black Death reveals how entire chapters of history can begin with clues too small to notice, our next mystery returns us to the sea. A place where unanswered questions often disappear beneath the tide. Here the mystery is not how something began, but where an entire fleet may have gone without leaving a clear destination behind. At sunrise, the harbor of La Rochelle is calm. Gentle waves lap against ancient stone quays that have overlooked the Atlantic for centuries. Fishing boats now occupy waters that once welcomed merchant vessels, warships, and religious orders traveling between Europe and distant shores. The medieval walls still stand watch over the old port, their weathered surfaces bearing silent witness to countless departures. Among them is one voyage that history has never fully explained. What became of the Templar fleet based at La Rochelle? The question has fascinated historians, archaeologists, and writers for generations. Unlike legends built entirely upon folklore, this mystery begins with a place that unquestionably existed. During the late 13th and early 14th centuries, La Rochelle served as one of the most important Atlantic ports controlled by the Knights Templar. From here, ships transported supplies, merchants, pilgrims, correspondents, and financial assets between England, France, the Iberian Peninsula, and other regions connected to the Order's vast network. The port itself was no secret. Its importance is well documented. What remains uncertain is what happened during the final days before the Knights Templar were destroyed. On Friday, October 13, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the coordinated arrest of Templars throughout his kingdom. The operation was carefully planned and carried out with remarkable speed. Hundreds of members of the order were imprisoned before they had any opportunity to organize resistance. Yet one intriguing detail appears repeatedly in later accounts. Royal officials failed to seize any significant Templar fleet at La Rochelle. Exactly how many ships were present shortly before the arrests remains uncertain. Medieval records are incomplete and surviving documents rarely provide precise inventories. Nevertheless, several historical references indicate that the port maintained vessels under Templar control. If ships were indeed stationed there, what became of them? One straightforward explanation is that the fleet simply dispersed in the ordinary course of business before the arrests took place. Medieval ships constantly traveled between ports, often spending weeks or months away from their home harbors. Some may have been engaged in commercial voyages, while others transported personnel or supplies elsewhere. If so, there may never have been a dramatic disappearance at all. For many historians, this remains the most cautious interpretation, but the timing invites further curiosity. The arrests were intended to be secret until the very last moment. If word somehow reached La Rochelle in advance, even by only a few days, experienced sailors could have prepared their departure before royal officials arrived. How such a warning might have spread remains uncertain. Messengers traveled quickly when political crises unfolded. Merchants exchanged information constantly. Noble families maintained networks of communication across great distances. Even rumors carried from town to town sometimes reached their destination before official orders. Could someone loyal to the order have recognized the danger early enough to act? The surviving evidence offers no definitive answer. Adding to the mystery is the remarkable administrative sophistication of the Knights Templar themselves. Far from being simply warriors, they managed one of medieval Europe's most efficient organizational systems. They maintained financial records, coordinated international logistics, and communicated across vast territories with surprising effectiveness for the period. Such an organization would likely have possessed contingency plans for protecting valuable assets during times of political instability. Whether those plans were ever put into action remains unknown. Over the centuries, several destinations have emerged as possible refuges for the missing vessels. Scotland is perhaps the most frequently discussed. At the time of the Templar arrests, Scotland stood in conflict with England, and King Robert the Bruce had been excommunicated following his seizure of the Scottish throne. Because papal authority carried less practical influence there under those circumstances, some later traditions suggest that fleeing Templars may have found relative safety north of the English border. Stories connect mysterious ships with remote Scottish harbors, isolated islands, and castles overlooking rough Atlantic waters. According to some accounts, surviving members of the order continued their lives quietly, eventually blending into local society. Yet, historians point out that contemporary documentation directly supporting these claims is scarce. The theory remains intriguing, but unproven. Another possibility points toward Portugal. Unlike France, the Portuguese crown generally adopted a more measured approach after the suppression of the Templars. Many former members were absorbed into the newly established Order of Christ, allowing experience, property, and organizational knowledge to continue under royal supervision. Could some of the fleet have sailed to Iberian ports where political conditions were less hostile? Several researchers consider this entirely plausible, although surviving shipping records do not provide clear confirmation. Others have looked much farther west. One of the most imaginative theories proposes that Templar sailors crossed the Atlantic long before the voyages traditionally associated with the Age of Exploration. According to this idea, experienced navigators may have reached unknown lands centuries before Christopher Columbus. Supporters sometimes point to unusual carvings, mysterious symbols, or architectural similarities found in different parts of the world. Mainstream historians, however, emphasize that no reliable archaeological evidence has demonstrated that Templar ships crossed the Atlantic or established settlements in the Americas. While medieval sailors certainly possessed impressive maritime skills, extraordinary claims require equally substantial evidence, and such evidence has not been found. The mystery becomes even more compelling when combined with the long-standing legend of the Templars' missing treasure. If ships truly departed La Rochelle before the arrests, what exactly might they have carried? Gold and silver are the obvious possibilities, but historians caution against imagining vast floating vaults filled with treasure. Much of the order's wealth consisted of land holdings, legal agreements, agricultural income, and financial obligations rather than portable riches. Still, valuable documents, account books, religious objects, diplomatic correspondence, and portable assets could certainly have been transported aboard ships. Some speculative traditions go much further. They suggest the fleet carried sacred relics, rare manuscripts, or knowledge collected during the Order's long presence in Jerusalem and the Holy Land. Stories involving the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, and other legendary objects frequently become attached to the mystery. Yet, these claims remain firmly within the realm of legend. No authenticated historical source confirms that such artifacts ever entered Templar possession. Modern researchers continue to investigate the question using methods unavailable to earlier generations. Maritime archaeology has identified countless medieval shipwrecks throughout European waters. Historians compare surviving customs records, royal correspondence, and commercial documents in search of overlooked references. Each newly translated manuscript offers another opportunity to clarify events. At the same time, every missing document reminds scholars how fragile the historical record can be. Storms destroy archives. Wars consume libraries. Salt water erases evidence. Centuries slowly dissolve the ordinary details that might once have answered extraordinary questions. Perhaps that is why the story of La Rochelle continues to capture the imagination. It exists in the narrow space between documented history and enduring possibility. We know the port existed. We know the Knights Templar maintained important operations there. We know the order collapsed with astonishing speed in 1307. Beyond those facts, certainty begins to fade. As evening mist drifts across the old harbor and the Atlantic tide quietly rises against the ancient stone walls, it becomes easy to imagine sails disappearing beyond the horizon, carrying secrets that no surviving record would ever reveal. Whether those ships reached Scotland, Portugal, another distant shore, or simply vanished into the ordinary rhythms of medieval commerce, their final voyage remains one of history's most captivating unanswered questions, one that may still rest somewhere beneath the sea, waiting for a forgotten piece of evidence to surface. If the vanished ships of the Knights Templar leave us wondering how an entire fleet could disappear into the Atlantic without a clear trace, our next mystery follows those same waters even farther west. This time the story is not about escaping persecution, but about a ruler who may have willingly sailed beyond the edge of the known world and never returned. The Atlantic Ocean has a way of concealing its past. From the rugged shores of West Africa, the horizon stretches into an uninterrupted expanse of blue, where sea and sky blend into a distant line that seems forever beyond reach. Powerful currents flow beneath the surface, invisible yet relentless, carrying ships across enormous distances. For centuries, sailors standing on these shores looked westward into an ocean that appeared endless, wondering what, if anything, lay beyond. Long before the celebrated voyages of the late 15th century, one remarkable story suggested that someone had already asked that question and attempted to answer it. His name was Abu Bakr II. Or perhaps, according to some historians, his name was simply Abu Bakr, with the numeral added by later writers attempting to distinguish him from earlier rulers. Even his identity contains small uncertainties, reflecting how fragmentary the surviving historical record has become. Yet despite these uncertainties, one extraordinary account has endured for more than 700 years. According to that account, a king abandoned his throne to sail into the Atlantic Ocean in search of what lay beyond the horizon. Unlike many medieval legends, this story does not originate from anonymous folklore. Its principal source comes from the famous 14th-century Arab scholar al-Umari. While compiling information about the Mali Empire, al-Umari recorded a conversation with Mansa Musa, the celebrated ruler whose immense wealth astonished the Islamic world during his pilgrimage to Cairo in 1324. When asked how he had become emperor, Mansa Musa reportedly explained that his predecessor had never intended to relinquish power. Instead, the former ruler had organized a massive maritime expedition. According to the account, the emperor became convinced that the Atlantic Ocean did not continue forever. Determined to discover its limits, he ordered the construction of a fleet numbering approximately 200 vessels. Supplies were loaded aboard, experienced crews assembled, and the expedition departed westward into waters no one from the empire had previously explored. Only one ship returned. Its captain reportedly described a powerful current in the open ocean. One by one, the other vessels entered it and disappeared from sight, unable to escape its force. Believing the current too dangerous, his own ship turned back. The emperor was not satisfied. If anything, the report strengthened his resolve. According to Mansa Musa's account, the ruler personally organized a second expedition, this time involving roughly 2,000 ships carrying sailors, provisions, and equipment for an even longer journey. Before departing, he appointed Mansa Musa as his deputy, intending to resume leadership upon his return. He was never seen again. The story is remarkably simple. Its implications are extraordinary. If the account is accurate, it would suggest that a West African expedition ventured deep into the Atlantic nearly 2 centuries before Christopher Columbus crossed the ocean. Such a voyage would reshape long-held assumptions about medieval exploration and the capabilities of the Mali Empire. Naturally, historians approach the story with careful caution. The first question concerns the source itself. Al-Umari never claimed to have witnessed these events. His information came from Mansa Musa, who himself was recounting the history of his predecessor. Historians generally regard al-Umari as a careful and respected scholar, and his descriptions of Mali's wealth and administration have proven reliable in many respects. Yet, like many medieval chroniclers, he relied heavily on interviews and second-hand testimony. Could Mansa Musa have been accurately preserving an authentic historical tradition? Or might the story have evolved as it passed from one generation to another? Neither possibility can be completely dismissed. Attention also turns to the maritime capabilities of medieval West Africa. The Mali Empire was among the most powerful states of its time, controlling extensive trade networks that linked West Africa with North Africa and the Mediterranean world. Its wealth, generated largely through gold and commerce, supported sophisticated cities such as Timbuktu and Gao, where scholarship and trade flourished. Less widely known is the empire's relationship with its rivers. The Niger River functioned as one of the region's great transportation corridors. Skilled boat builders constructed vessels capable of carrying people and cargo over considerable distances. River navigation formed an essential part of the empire's economy. Whether those same traditions could be adapted for prolonged Atlantic voyages remains a matter of debate. Some maritime historians argue that constructing seaworthy ships would not have been beyond the technical abilities of such a prosperous civilization. Others point out that river vessels and ocean-going ships often differ substantially in design, particularly when facing the immense waves and unpredictable weather of the open Atlantic. Then there is the mysterious current described by the lone returning captain. Modern oceanographers note that powerful Atlantic currents flow westward from the coast of Africa toward the Americas. The North Equatorial Current, driven by prevailing winds, naturally carries floating objects and sailing vessels across the ocean. European navigators would later rely upon these same currents during the Age of Exploration. Could the returning sailor have encountered precisely such a current? If so, his description may represent an unexpectedly accurate observation of Atlantic oceanography. Interestingly, drifting westward with the current is often easier than returning eastward. A fleet lacking detailed knowledge of global wind systems could theoretically reach distant shores, while finding the journey home vastly more difficult. This possibility has encouraged more speculative theories. Some researchers have wondered whether Abu Bakr's expedition may actually have reached the Americas. Supporters occasionally point to similarities in artistic motifs, disputed archaeological finds, or later accounts describing visitors arriving from across the Atlantic before European contact. These ideas remain highly controversial. To date, mainstream archaeology has found no widely accepted evidence demonstrating that the expedition established lasting settlements or significant contact with indigenous civilizations in the Americas. Extraordinary voyages require equally compelling evidence, and such evidence has yet to emerge. Still, absence of proof does not necessarily reveal what became of the fleet. The Atlantic is immense. Storms, shifting currents, and centuries of coastal change have erased countless traces of maritime history. If hundreds or even thousands of vessels disappeared into those waters, what physical evidence would realistically survive after 7 centuries? Wood decays. Metal corrodes. Organic materials vanish beneath layers of sediment. Even locating comparatively recent shipwrecks often proves enormously difficult despite advanced technology. Some historians propose a far simpler explanation. Perhaps the expedition was smaller than later accounts suggested. Medieval chroniclers occasionally employed impressive numbers symbolically rather than literally. A fleet described as numbering 2,000 vessels may instead represent a much more modest undertaking whose scale grew over generations of retelling. Others suggest the voyage may never have reached the open Atlantic at all. Severe weather, navigational difficulties, equipment failure, or shortages of food and fresh water could have forced disaster long before any distant land appeared. These possibilities require no unknown civilizations or hidden continents. Yet they leave the central mystery unresolved. Why would a ruler abandon one of the wealthiest empires on Earth to pursue such an uncertain expedition? The answer may lie in the remarkable intellectual climate of the medieval Islamic world. By the 14th century, scholars across North Africa and the Middle East possessed sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, geography, mathematics, and navigation. They translated ancient Greek works, refined astronomical observations, and produced increasingly detailed maps of the known world. Curiosity itself had become a powerful force. For an ambitious ruler surrounded by scholars and merchants, the western horizon may not have represented a barrier, but an unanswered question. What lay beyond the sea? Where did the currents lead? Could new lands, new trade routes, or entirely unknown peoples exist beyond the limits of existing maps? History shows that such questions have often inspired remarkable journeys. Over time, Abu Bakr's expedition has acquired an almost mythical quality. Some storytellers imagine hidden colonies established across distant coastlines. Others describe fleets swallowed by perpetual storms or carried into waters from which no sailor could return. These accounts belong to legend rather than documented history. Yet, they reflect the enduring fascination inspired by a voyage whose ending remains unwritten. Modern researchers continue to examine historical manuscripts, linguistic evidence, maritime archaeology, and environmental data, searching for clues that might clarify the story. Every newly translated document and every underwater survey offers another opportunity to test old assumptions against fresh evidence. So far, however, certainty remains elusive. Perhaps that is what makes this mystery so compelling. Unlike stories built entirely upon fantasy, the expedition of Abu Bakr stands upon a foundation of genuine historical testimony. A respected chronicler recorded the account. A powerful emperor repeated it. An ambitious voyage appears to have been remembered by those who inherited an empire. Everything beyond that point disappears into the Atlantic itself. As the sun sinks beyond the western horizon and waves continue their endless journey toward distant shores, the ocean reveals nothing of the ships that may once have crossed its surface. Whether Abu Bakr's fleet was lost to storms, carried to unfamiliar lands, or transformed by centuries of retelling into something larger than history itself, the Atlantic continues to guard its silence. Somewhere beyond the horizon, or perhaps beneath thousands of meters of water, the answer may still exist, waiting for the moment when history and discovery finally meet. If the Atlantic has shown us how oceans can conceal entire fleets, our next mystery invites us beneath solid stone into a place where history, faith, and unanswered questions have intertwined for thousands of years. Here, the greatest secrets may not have vanished across distant horizons. They may still rest beneath our feet. Rising above the ancient streets of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount dominates the skyline with an unmistakable sense of permanence. Massive limestone walls support a broad plateau that has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, countless religious ceremonies, and centuries of political change. Beneath its sunlit courtyards, however, lies another world. One hidden in darkness where tunnels, chambers, and forgotten passageways have inspired generations of speculation. Exactly what exists beneath the Temple Mount has long remained one of archaeology's most intriguing questions. Much of the underground network is not mythical. Engineers, historians, and archaeologists agree that the site contains an extensive system of ancient cisterns, retaining walls, vaulted spaces, and passageways constructed over many centuries. Some were designed to collect rainwater, others strengthened the enormous platform above, while several appear to have served practical purposes during different historical periods. Yet, because the location is among the most sacred and politically sensitive places in the world, comprehensive archaeological excavations beneath the plateau have remained extremely limited. As a result, many sections have never been fully documented using modern archaeological methods. That absence of complete knowledge has naturally encouraged curiosity. Ancient writings describe monumental construction projects carried out during the reign of King Herod in the 1st century BC. To enlarge the sacred platform, engineers built enormous retaining walls and filled vast areas with carefully designed underground structures. Some individual stone blocks used in these foundations weigh tons, demonstrating an astonishing level of engineering skill. Walking through the accessible tunnels today, visitors encounter long corridors carved from ancient stone, immense arches supporting unseen weight above, and silent chambers illuminated only by carefully placed lights. Every passage hints that the visible monument represents only part of a much larger architectural achievement. Could there still be undiscovered rooms beyond the known corridors? It is a question that has fascinated explorers for centuries. During the 19th century, British surveyor Charles Warren carried out one of the earliest systematic investigations of the underground spaces surrounding the Temple Mount. Lowered by ropes into vertical shafts and narrow openings, he mapped previously unknown tunnels, reservoirs, and engineering features with remarkable precision. Many of these passages now bear his name. Warren's work revealed just how complex the underground landscape truly was, but it also demonstrated its limitations. Large portions of the area remained inaccessible, blocked by collapsed stone, sealed entrances, or religious restrictions that prevented further exploration. Where evidence ends, speculation often begins. Among the most enduring theories concerns the Knights Templar. During the Crusader period, members of the military order established their headquarters on the Temple Mount, believing it stood upon the site of the ancient temple. According to later traditions, the Templars spent years exploring hidden chambers beneath the plateau. Some writers have suggested they discovered long-lost religious relics, ancient manuscripts, or valuable treasures concealed deep below the foundations. Others believe they uncovered forgotten knowledge that helped shape the remarkable influence the order later achieved across Europe. No contemporary evidence confirms these claims, and historians generally regard them as legends rather than established fact. Even so, the combination of genuine underground structures and incomplete historical records has ensured that such stories continue to endure. Modern technology has offered new ways to study hidden architecture without extensive excavation. Ground-penetrating radar, laser scanning, and digital mapping have revealed additional structural details in many archaeological sites around the world. Yet beneath the Temple Mount, opportunities to apply these methods remain limited because of the site's extraordinary historical, cultural, and religious significance. As a result, the underground landscape remains only partially understood. Perhaps that is what makes this mystery so compelling. Unlike legends built entirely upon imagination, the hidden chambers beneath the Temple Mount undeniably exist. The unanswered question is not whether underground spaces are there, but how much of them remains unseen, undocumented, or simply forgotten by history. Somewhere beneath those ancient stones, beyond passages already known and mapped, there may still be rooms that have remained undisturbed for centuries, quietly waiting for the day when their stories can finally be told. The mystery deepens when ancient texts are placed alongside the physical landscape. Throughout history, numerous chroniclers described hidden chambers beneath the sacred plateau, although their accounts often differed in detail. Some wrote of vast underground halls capable of storing supplies for thousands of people. Others mentioned concealed passageways leading toward the surrounding hills, while a few referred to sealed rooms whose purpose had already been forgotten by their own time. Separating fact from tradition is rarely straightforward. One feature known with certainty is the remarkable system of underground cisterns. More than 30 have been identified beneath the platform, some large enough to resemble subterranean caverns rather than simple reservoirs. For centuries, these chambers collected precious rainwater, ensuring a reliable supply during dry seasons and periods of siege. Their immense size often surprised early explorers, many of whom described them with a mixture of scientific curiosity and genuine awe. As these investigators moved through narrow openings with lanterns in hand, they encountered smooth stone walls worn by countless generations, stairways descending into darkness, and vaulted ceilings that seemed to disappear beyond the reach of flickering light. Every echo hinted at unseen spaces extending farther into the bedrock. Could every chamber have been found? Or might others still remain hidden behind collapsed walls or intentionally sealed entrances? Such questions have encouraged a wide range of theories over the centuries. One enduring tradition centers on the Ark of the Covenant. According to certain historical interpretations, the sacred object disappeared before the destruction of the First Temple. Since no universally accepted record describes its final location, some researchers have wondered whether priests could have concealed it somewhere beneath the Temple Mount during a time of crisis. There is, however, no archaeological evidence confirming this idea. It remains one of several possibilities that continue to inspire discussion without reaching historical consensus. Another theory focuses not on sacred artifacts, but on forgotten archives. Ancient civilizations often stored official records, religious scrolls, and administrative documents in protected chambers beneath important buildings. If similar repositories once existed beneath the Temple Mount, what knowledge might they have contained? Could undiscovered inscriptions reshape historians' understanding of the region's past, or would they simply confirm what is already known? Even modest discoveries in such a location could prove historically significant. The challenges facing modern archaeology are unique. Every stone within the area carries religious, historical, and cultural importance for multiple communities. Excavation is therefore approached with exceptional caution, and many areas remain inaccessible to researchers. Unlike many archaeological sites where large-scale excavations can continue for decades, investigation here is often limited by practical, political, and religious considerations. This means that some questions cannot yet be answered, not because evidence is absent, but because it cannot easily be reached. Technology continues to evolve. Three-dimensional mapping, non-invasive imaging, and advanced surveying techniques may eventually provide clearer pictures of what lies beneath without disturbing the structures themselves. Each technological advance offers the possibility of revealing architectural details that earlier generations could scarcely imagine. Yet even the most sophisticated instruments have limits. Solid rock conceals its secrets patiently. Ancient walls reveal only what time allows. Perhaps that is why the underground world beneath the Temple Mount continues to occupy such a unique place in historical imagination. It is neither an entirely solved archaeological site nor an unrestricted field of exploration. Instead, it exists in a rare space where documented history, architectural achievement, and enduring mystery meet beneath layers of stone accumulated over thousands of years. As silence settles over the ancient plateau after nightfall, the chambers below remain unchanged, hidden beneath one of the world's most remarkable landscapes. Whether they contain nothing more than extraordinary engineering or preserve forgotten spaces that have escaped every recorded survey, no one can yet say with complete certainty. Until new evidence emerges, the darkness beneath those ancient foundations continues to invite the same quiet question that has echoed for centuries. How much of the past still lies waiting just beyond the reach of human sight? If the silent chambers beneath the Temple Mount remind us that some of history's greatest secrets may still lie hidden beneath layers of stone, our next mystery turns from buried architecture to something even more fragile. Not walls or passageways, but words. Ideas once preserved on ink and parchment, only to disappear into the shadows of history. In the heart of medieval Baghdad, where the Tigris River reflected the glow of countless lanterns after sunset, stood one of the most extraordinary centers of learning the world had ever known. Shelves filled with handwritten manuscripts stretched through vast halls. Scholars from different cultures gathered to debate mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, geography, and engineering. Every room echoed with quiet conversations, the scratching of reed pens, and the careful turning of delicate pages. This remarkable institution became known as the House of Wisdom. For centuries, it represented far more than a library. It was a meeting place of civilizations. Beginning during the Abbasid Caliphate, particularly under Caliph al-Ma'mun in the early 9th century, the House of Wisdom became a center for translation and original research. Works from ancient Greece, Persia, India, and other regions were translated into Arabic, preserving knowledge that might otherwise have vanished. At the same time, Muslim scholars expanded upon these ideas, producing original discoveries that influenced science for generations. Astronomers refined observations of the heavens. Physicians compiled detailed medical texts. Mathematicians developed new methods of calculation. Philosophers examined questions that continue to shape intellectual thought today. The institution became a symbol of curiosity itself. Yet despite its immense importance, much about the House of Wisdom remains uncertain. Historians continue to debate its exact organization, its physical layout, and even the full extent of its collections. Unlike many famous libraries whose buildings survived in some form, the House of Wisdom disappeared so completely that surprisingly little physical evidence remains. The greatest mystery concerns not the building but its lost manuscripts. In 1258, Baghdad faced one of the darkest moments in its history. Mongol forces under Hulagu Khan captured the city after a devastating siege. Contemporary chroniclers described widespread destruction, including damage to libraries and centers of learning. One enduring tradition claims that so many books were thrown into the Tigris River that its waters darkened with ink. Whether this image is entirely literal or partly symbolic remains debated by historians. What is beyond dispute is that an enormous amount of knowledge disappeared during this period. How much was truly lost? No one can answer with certainty. Some manuscripts undoubtedly perished forever. Others had already been copied and distributed across the Islamic world, allowing portions of their contents to survive in distant libraries. In some cases, only fragments remain, preserved within later quotations written by scholars who copied passages from works that no longer exist. These scattered references offer tantalizing glimpses into vanished texts. A mathematician cites an earlier treatise now lost. A physician refers to a medical encyclopedia that has never been found. A philosopher argues against ideas contained in a manuscript known only by title. Each reference hints at a much larger body of knowledge that has disappeared. This raises an intriguing question. Could some of those missing works still exist? History offers surprising reasons for cautious optimism. Throughout the medieval world, manuscripts were copied constantly. A single text might travel hundreds or even thousands of miles, carried by merchants, scholars, pilgrims, or diplomats. Libraries in Cairo, Damascus, Samarkand, Cordoba, and countless smaller cities exchanged books through networks that stretched across continents. If copies reached distant collections before Baghdad fell, some may have survived unnoticed. Indeed, remarkable discoveries continue to occur. Previously unknown medieval manuscripts occasionally emerge from monastery archives, private collections, neglected storerooms, or forgotten libraries. In several instances, scholars have identified works believed lost for centuries simply because they had been miscatalogued or remained unread. Each discovery encourages hope that others may still wait to be recognized. Some historians believe the greatest losses involved astronomy and mathematics. During the 9th and 10th centuries, Baghdad became one of the world's leading centers for scientific observation. Astronomers produced detailed star catalogs, refined planetary calculations, and improved astronomical instruments. How many observations disappeared alongside the missing manuscripts? Could forgotten tables or diagrams still exist in an overlooked archive somewhere in the world? Others focus on medicine. The physicians associated with the House of Wisdom collected knowledge from numerous medical traditions, comparing treatments, recording clinical observations, and translating important texts from earlier civilizations. While many influential medical works survive through later copies, researchers suspect that countless specialized treatises vanished during the destruction of Baghdad. The mystery grows even deeper when later legends are considered. Some traditions claim that librarians recognizing the approaching danger secretly removed valuable manuscripts before the city fell. According to these stories, collections were hidden in underground chambers, sealed inside private residences, or transported to safer regions beyond the reach of the invading army. There is little historical evidence confirming such dramatic escapes. Yet, similar efforts to protect libraries have occurred throughout history. During wars and invasions, scholars have often risked their lives to preserve books by hiding or relocating them. The possibility cannot be dismissed entirely, even if no direct proof has yet emerged. More speculative theories extend the mystery further. Some writers suggest the House of Wisdom contained scientific works so advanced that later generations could scarcely understand them. Others imagine forgotten inventions, lost maps, or philosophical writings capable of transforming accepted history. Modern historians approach these claims with considerable caution. The true significance of the House of Wisdom does not depend upon mysterious technologies or extraordinary secrets. Its genuine achievements were already remarkable. The scholars who worked there preserved, expanded, and transmitted knowledge across cultures, creating intellectual foundations that influenced mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy for centuries. Even without legendary manuscripts, its legacy remains profound. Still, unanswered questions continue to linger. How many works disappeared without leaving a single trace? How many survive anonymously in collections that have never been thoroughly examined? Could an overlooked manuscript resting quietly on an aging shelf still contain the forgotten voice of a scholar whose ideas have been absent from history for nearly 800 years? As evening settles over the banks of the Tigris, and the sounds of the modern city replace the echoes of ancient classrooms, the House of Wisdom exists today only in memory, scattered fragments, and enduring influence. Yet somewhere among the world's archives, hidden collections, or forgotten manuscripts waiting to be opened once again, there may still rest pages that escaped history's darkest chapter. Silent witnesses to a library whose greatest secrets may not have been lost after all. The search for those missing manuscripts has become a mystery in its own right. Unlike the hunt for buried treasure or forgotten monuments, this investigation unfolds quietly in libraries, archives, and private collections scattered across the world. Historians rarely search with shovels or excavation tools. Instead, they follow faint references preserved in catalogs, handwritten notes in the margins of old books, and brief quotations copied by scholars who unknowingly became the final witnesses to vanished works. Sometimes a single sentence can transform an entire investigation. A medieval author may mention consulting a book that no longer exists. Another scholar writing centuries later might preserve a paragraph from that same volume while arguing against its conclusions. Although the original manuscript has disappeared, these fragments offer valuable clues, allowing researchers to reconstruct small portions of texts that would otherwise be completely unknown. This method has revealed that many influential works survived only through echoes left behind in later writings. In some cases, historians know the titles of books, but nothing about their contents. In others, they possess detailed summaries without ever seeing the original manuscript itself. There are even instances where an author's name survives while every known copy of that person's work has vanished. These gaps raise fascinating possibilities. Could forgotten collections still exist in places that have never been thoroughly explored? Throughout history, countless libraries changed hands as kingdoms rose and fell. Books were purchased, inherited, donated, transported across continents, or hidden during times of conflict. Entire collections disappeared into private estates, religious institutions, and remote archives where they remained untouched for generations. Occasionally, extraordinary discoveries emerge from the most unexpected places. Scholars have uncovered valuable manuscripts hidden inside sealed walls, preserved within neglected storerooms, or resting unnoticed among thousands of uncatalogued volumes. Some texts survived simply because no one realized their significance. Others remained unread for centuries because they were written in rare scripts or damaged by age, making them difficult to identify. Each discovery reminds historians that the story of the House of Wisdom may not yet be complete. Among researchers, one particularly intriguing subject involves translation itself. The scholars of Baghdad did far more than copy ancient knowledge. They compared different versions of the same work, corrected errors introduced by earlier scribes, and occasionally expanded upon original ideas with their own observations. If unknown manuscripts were ever recovered, they might not merely preserve lost Greek or Persian writings. They could reveal entirely original contributions produced within the House of Wisdom itself, ideas that disappeared before they could influence later generations. What scientific observations might they contain? Could forgotten astronomical records provide new insight into medieval observations of the night sky? Might medical treatises describe treatments or surgical techniques otherwise unknown? Or perhaps philosophical discussions could reveal debates that shaped intellectual history in ways now impossible to trace. The answers remain hidden. Modern technology has introduced powerful new methods for investigating these mysteries. Multispectral imaging allows faded writing to become visible once again, revealing text invisible to the naked eye. Artificial intelligence assists scholars in comparing handwriting, identifying missing fragments, and reconstructing damaged manuscripts with remarkable precision. Digital archives now connect libraries separated by thousands of miles, enabling researchers to compare collections that earlier generations could never study together. Yet technology cannot recover what no longer exists. If certain manuscripts were destroyed beyond recognition, their contents may have disappeared forever. Perhaps that realization gives the mystery its greatest emotional weight. Every lost manuscript represents more than ink on parchment. It preserves the thoughts of individuals who devoted their lives to understanding the world around them. Their observations, questions, calculations, and discoveries once passed from teacher to student, generation after generation, before suddenly falling silent. Even so, history has often surprised us. Documents believed lost have reappeared after centuries of obscurity. Forgotten archives have emerged beneath layers of dust. Anonymous manuscripts have been correctly identified only after careful study revealed the identity of their long-forgotten authors. For that reason, the search continues with quiet determination rather than certainty. As the imagined echoes of turning pages fade into silence, and the memory of the House of Wisdom drifts across the centuries, one possibility remains impossible to dismiss. Somewhere, hidden among overlooked shelves or sealed collections yet to be carefully examined, a forgotten manuscript may still be waiting. If that day ever comes, it would not simply restore words written long ago. It would reconnect the modern world with voices that history almost allowed to disappear forever. If the vanished manuscripts of the House of Wisdom remind us that entire libraries can disappear while leaving only scattered echoes behind, our next mystery follows a different kind of disappearance. This time, the missing legacy is not written on parchment, but in the footsteps of soldiers who marched into history and seemingly never returned. The desert has a remarkable way of erasing human presence. Wind sweeps across endless plains, smoothing footprints within hours and burying abandoned camps beneath shifting layers of sand. Ancient trails fade until they become indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape, leaving only silence where thousands of voices may once have echoed. It is within such unforgiving terrain that one of the lesser-known military mysteries of the medieval Islamic world continues to invite speculation. Some historical traditions speak of a military expedition sent during the reign of Sultan al-Nasir that vanished before completing its mission. Unlike famous battles preserved in great detail, this story survives only in scattered references, later chronicles, and regional traditions, making it difficult to separate documented events from stories that evolved over time. Even identifying the exact ruler can present challenges. The title al-Nasir was used by several Muslim rulers across different centuries. Most discussions surrounding this mystery associate it with Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad of the Mamluk Sultanate, whose long reign during the 14th century brought political stability, architectural achievement, and renewed military strength to Egypt and surrounding territories. His administration maintained extensive trade routes, defended strategic frontiers, and dispatched expeditions into distant regions for military, diplomatic, and economic purposes. Many of those missions are well documented. One, however, remains unusually obscure. According to later accounts, a sizable force departed on an assignment whose precise objective has been lost to history. Some versions describe a mission into remote desert territory. Others suggest the army was sent to investigate unrest near important caravan routes, while a few traditions claim the soldiers were searching for isolated fortresses, hidden oases, or valuable mineral resources. The destination changes from one account to another. The ending remains remarkably similar. The army never returned. For historians, this immediately raises important questions. Was there truly a single expedition that disappeared without explanation, or have several unrelated events gradually merged into one enduring legend? The surviving evidence is frustratingly incomplete. Medieval chroniclers often focused on major victories, royal ceremonies, or political struggles, while unsuccessful expeditions sometimes received only brief mention. If records were later damaged, copied inaccurately, or lost altogether, reconstructing the full story becomes extraordinarily difficult. The environment itself may provide the simplest explanation. The deserts stretching across North Africa and parts of the Middle East are among the harshest landscapes on Earth. Temperatures can change dramatically between day and night. Reliable water sources are separated by immense distances, and sudden sandstorms are capable of reducing visibility to almost nothing. Experienced travelers understood these dangers well. Even so, a single navigational mistake could prove catastrophic. Caravans occasionally vanished after missing a crucial oasis. Small military patrols became disoriented when familiar landmarks disappeared beneath drifting sand. Without accurate maps or modern navigation, survival often depended upon local guides and detailed knowledge passed down through generations. Could Sultan al-Nasir's expedition simply have become lost? Many historians consider this entirely plausible. Another possibility involves conflict rather than nature. The medieval trade routes crossing these regions were valuable corridors linking distant cities. Control over wells, mountain passes, and caravan stations often brought wealth as well as political influence. An expedition traveling through contested territory might have encountered resistance from local forces or tribal confederations whose own histories were recorded through oral tradition rather than written chronicles. If such a confrontation occurred far from major population centers, surviving documentation might have been extremely limited. There are also logistical considerations. Supplying a large medieval army required remarkable organization. Food, water, animals, equipment, and communication all had to function together across hundreds of miles. If several problems emerged simultaneously, a prolonged drought, disease among transport animals, damaged supply lines, or unexpected weather, the consequences could quickly become irreversible. History contains numerous examples of armies defeated not by enemies but by the landscapes they attempted to cross. Yet the mystery extends beyond practical explanations. Local traditions in several desert regions speak of abandoned encampments occasionally revealed after powerful winds uncover ancient ground. Travelers have reported isolated stone foundations, fragments of weapons, broken pottery, and weathered human remains emerging briefly before being reclaimed by shifting sand. Most of these discoveries cannot be confidently linked to any particular historical event, but they illustrate how easily entire chapters of the past can disappear beneath changing landscapes. More speculative theories have developed over time. Some storytellers describe an expedition that discovered an unknown settlement hidden beyond the ordinary caravan routes. Others speak of soldiers entering a vast sandstorm so intense that they seemed to vanish from the world entirely. A few legends even suggest the army uncovered ancient ruins whose secrets were never meant to be disturbed. These accounts belong to folklore rather than verified history. Even so, they reveal how communities have attempted to explain an event for which clear historical answers remain unavailable. Modern archaeology continues to transform our understanding of ancient deserts. Satellite imagery has revealed forgotten roads, buried settlements, and dried river systems invisible from the ground. Ground surveys occasionally uncover campsites or fortifications that had remained concealed for centuries beneath layers of sand. Each new discovery demonstrates that deserts do not erase history completely. They preserve it patiently. Perhaps somewhere beneath an isolated dune or beside a forgotten well lies physical evidence capable of illuminating this mysterious expedition. A fragment of armor, an inscription, or the remains of a temporary camp could one day provide the missing connection between scattered historical references and the reality behind them. Until then, the story remains suspended between history and possibility. As evening settles across the open desert and the final light fades from the horizon, the wind continues its endless work, reshaping the landscape grain by grain. Whether Sultan al-Nasir's lost army was overcome by nature, conflict, or circumstances now impossible to reconstruct, its fate has become another quiet reminder that history does not always end with certainty. Sometimes it simply disappears beyond the next ridge, leaving only silence and the enduring hope that one forgotten clue may still be waiting beneath the sand. The mystery becomes even more intriguing when viewed through the lens of medieval geography. Maps from the 14th century often left enormous regions only partially understood, especially beyond established trade routes. Cartographers relied not only on direct observation but also on reports from merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, and travelers. As information passed from one source to another, certainty gradually blended with assumption. For commanders leading an expedition into unfamiliar territory, this uncertainty posed a constant challenge. Distances were estimated rather than precisely measured. Seasonal rivers appeared and disappeared. Landmarks described by one traveler could prove unrecognizable to another. A route considered reliable one year might become impassable after prolonged drought or shifting terrain. Even the most experienced guides depended upon knowledge that could change with the landscape itself. This uncertainty has led some historians to reconsider the expedition's intended destination. Rather than searching for a lost city or confronting an enemy army, perhaps the mission involved securing strategic wells or reopening trade corridors disrupted by local conflict. Such assignments rarely attracted the attention given to major military campaigns. Yet, they were essential to maintaining communication across vast territories. If an expedition failed far from populated regions, news of its fate might never have reached the capital. The absence of detailed records does not necessarily indicate that the event never occurred. Instead, it highlights the fragility of medieval documentation. Official archives were vulnerable to fire, war, political upheaval, and simple neglect. Chroniclers often copied earlier works by hand, occasionally omitting details they considered unimportant or introducing small errors that accumulated over generations. A brief reference preserved in one manuscript could disappear entirely if later copies failed to include it. For this reason, historians often work like detectives, assembling a larger picture from scattered fragments that survived by chance. Archaeology has added another dimension to the investigation. Across the deserts of Egypt and neighboring regions, researchers have identified abandoned forts, isolated watchtowers, forgotten caravan stations, and dry wells that once supported long-distance travel. Many remain only partially excavated. Some have yielded coins, pottery, arrowheads, and inscriptions that illuminate forgotten chapters of medieval history. Yet, countless sites remain unexplored. The sheer scale of the landscape makes comprehensive investigation nearly impossible. Vast areas have never been systematically surveyed, and shifting sand continues to conceal or expose archaeological remains with each passing generation. This raises an intriguing possibility. Could evidence connected to the missing expedition already exist beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered by future research? Even a single inscribed stone mentioning a military unit, a commander, or a destination could dramatically reshape historians' understanding of the story. Among local traditions, however, the mystery takes on a different character. Some accounts describe strange lights appearing across isolated stretches of desert during certain nights, while others speak of distant echoes resembling marching footsteps carried by the wind. Such stories belong to regional folklore rather than documented history. Yet they reflect the powerful impression left by landscapes where silence itself can seem almost unsettling. Deserts often inspire these traditions. Their immense openness alters sound, distorts distance, and creates optical illusions that have fascinated travelers for centuries. A distant rock formation may resemble ruined walls. Heat rising from the ground produces shimmering mirages that mimic lakes or settlements. Under such conditions, imagination and observation can easily become intertwined. Perhaps that is why stories of vanished expeditions continue to endure long after written records have faded. Whether the lost army of Sultan al-Nasir disappeared because of harsh environmental conditions, logistical failure, conflict, or an event that history no longer remembers, the unanswered questions remain remarkably resilient. Somewhere beneath layers of wind-blown sand, beyond forgotten caravan routes and abandoned wells, traces of that journey may still survive. Until they are found, the desert continues to guard its silence, preserving one more mystery that refuses to surrender its final chapter. If the endless desert reminds us how entire armies can disappear without leaving a clear trail, our next mystery shifts to the windswept shores of the Black Sea, where the walls of a medieval fortress witnessed an event that may have changed history in ways no one present could have imagined. Here, the greatest question is not who won the siege, but whether an invisible enemy escaped beyond the battlefield. Standing along the Crimean coastline, the ancient fortress of Kaffa once overlooked one of the busiest trading ports of the medieval world. High stone walls rose above the harbor, protecting warehouses filled with silk, spices, grain, and precious goods arriving from distant lands. Merchant ships from Europe and Asia crowded its docks, carrying not only cargo and travelers, but also news, languages, and ideas from across continents. In the 14th century, Kaffa was far more than a fortified city. It was a crossroads between civilizations. That position also made it a prize worth fighting for. Around 1346, the city came under siege by forces of the Mongol Golden Horde, commonly associated with Khan Yani Beg. The conflict itself was not unusual for the period. Medieval warfare frequently centered on strategic ports, trade routes, and fortified settlements. What has made the siege of Kaffa remarkable, however, is one account describing an event unlike almost anything recorded in military history. According to the Italian notary Gabriele da Musi, whose chronicle was written not long after the events, disease spread through the besieging army during the campaign. As large numbers of soldiers died, the attackers allegedly used siege engines to hurl infected corpses over the city walls, hoping that disease would spread among those sheltering inside. If the account is accurate, it could represent one of history's earliest documented examples of biological warfare. Yet, historians continue to debate exactly what happened. One important question concerns the source itself. Although Gabriele da Musi provided the most famous description, there is no evidence that he personally witnessed the siege. His account appears to rely on reports gathered from others, meaning that some details may have been exaggerated, misunderstood, or reshaped as the story spread. Medieval chronicles often blended careful observation with dramatic storytelling, making it difficult to determine where direct evidence ends and interpretation begins. Even so, many scholars believe the core event deserves serious consideration. The disease affecting the besieging forces is widely believed to have been plague caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. Modern research suggests the plague was already spreading through parts of Central Asia and along major trade routes during this period. Fleas carried by infected rodents played a primary role in transmitting the disease, allowing outbreaks to travel with remarkable speed through commercial networks. This raises an intriguing possibility. Even if infected bodies were thrown into the city, did that act actually spread the plague? Or was the disease already moving through the region by other means? Many epidemiologists argue that merchant ships leaving Kaffa may have carried infected rats and fleas to Mediterranean ports, contributing to the devastating pandemic later known as the Black Death. In this view, the siege may have coincided with the epidemic rather than serving as its direct cause. Others suggest the catapulted bodies could have increased local exposure even if they were not responsible for the broader spread of the disease. The evidence remains incomplete. Archaeological discoveries, historical records, and modern genetic studies have greatly expanded our understanding of medieval plague. But they have not answered every question surrounding Kaffa. Human remains recovered from plague cemeteries have allowed scientists to reconstruct ancient strains of the bacterium, revealing how the disease evolved over time. These findings confirm the presence of plague in Eurasia during the mid-14th century. Yet they cannot fully reconstruct the precise sequence of events during the siege itself. As often happens in history, certainty gives way to probability. Beyond the scientific debate lies another mystery. The decisions made by people facing circumstances they scarcely understood. Medieval physicians knew nothing of bacteria or microscopic organisms. Disease was frequently explained through environmental conditions, divine judgment, or corrupted air. If commanders truly ordered infected bodies to be launched into the city, did they believe disease itself could be used as a weapon, or were they simply attempting to spread fear among the defenders? Their intentions remain impossible to know with confidence. Over time, the story has grown into something larger than the siege itself. Some writers describe Kaffa as the moment biological warfare first entered recorded history. Others caution that the surviving evidence is too limited to support such a definitive conclusion. Between these perspectives lies a mystery built not upon legend, but upon incomplete documentation and the enduring challenge of interpreting medieval sources. As waves continue to break against the ancient harbor and the weathered walls face the sea as they have for centuries, the echoes of that distant siege remain unusually quiet. Whether Kaffa witnessed the deliberate weaponization of disease or simply stood at the crossroads of a pandemic already unfolding, its story reminds us that history's most powerful forces are not always visible. Sometimes the greatest mysteries travel silently, carried by the wind, hidden within ordinary journeys, leaving questions that continue to linger long after the battle itself has faded into the past. The mystery surrounding Kaffa extends beyond the walls of the fortress itself. It reaches into the wider question of how ideas, diseases, and human actions become intertwined over time. Historians often caution against reducing complex historical events to a single dramatic moment. Yet certain episodes continue to capture attention because they seem to stand at the crossroads of history. The Siege of Kaffa is one such episode. By the mid-14th century, trade networks stretched across Eurasia with remarkable efficiency. Merchant caravans crossed mountains and deserts while ships connected distant ports from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. These roads carried extraordinary wealth and cultural exchange. But they also created invisible pathways through which disease could travel. Long before anyone understood microbes, the world had already become deeply interconnected. A traveler leaving one city might unknowingly carry illness hundreds of miles away. A merchant vessel, delayed by favorable winds, could arrive in a crowded harbor with more than spices and textiles in its cargo hold. Every bustling marketplace became a meeting point not only for people but also for unseen biological forces that no one yet knew existed. This broader context has encouraged many researchers to examine kapha as one piece of a much larger story rather than an isolated event. Even if the famous account of infected bodies being launched over the walls is substantially accurate, it is unlikely to explain the enormous spread of the Black Death on its own. Modern studies indicate that plague outbreaks were already occurring across vast regions before the disease reached many European ports. Multiple routes by land and by sea almost certainly contributed to its devastating expansion. Yet the image described in the medieval chronicle remains unforgettable. It forces us to consider how desperation can reshape human behavior during times of crisis. Sieges were brutal contests of endurance. Food supplies diminished. Disease spread rapidly among crowded populations, and both attackers and defenders searched constantly for any advantage. Psychological warfare was common. Flaming projectiles, loud displays of force, and grim warnings were intended to weaken an opponent's resolve before the walls themselves could be breached. If disease became part of that struggle, even in a limited way, it would reflect not only military strategy, but also the limited medical understanding of the age. Today, historians continue to compare surviving manuscripts, archaeological evidence, and scientific research in an effort to separate historical reality from later embellishment. Every newly translated document and every advance in ancient DNA analysis adds another small piece to the puzzle. Even so, important gaps remain. No eyewitness account from inside the city has survived describing the alleged attack in detail. Contemporary records from different regions emphasize different aspects of the siege, and many documents that might have clarified the story have simply been lost to time. Perhaps that uncertainty is what gives the mystery its lasting power. Standing before the weathered remains of kapha's ancient fortifications, it is easy to imagine the tension that once filled the air. The distant sounds of siege engines, the crowded streets behind the walls, and the anxious gaze of defenders watching the horizon for signs of what would come next. Whether the greatest danger came from enemy soldiers or from an invisible disease already moving silently through the world is a question that history has never answered with complete certainty. And perhaps it never will. Like so many mysteries that survive from the medieval world, the siege of kapha exists in the narrow space between documented fact and unanswered possibility, reminding us that sometimes the most enduring secrets are not hidden beneath the earth or lost beneath the sea, but preserved within the incomplete pages of history itself. If the siege of kapha reminds us that history's greatest mysteries are sometimes carried by invisible forces rather than armies alone, our next story returns to the sea where entire fleets may have vanished beneath restless waves, taking with them fortunes, royal ambitions, and secrets that have never been recovered. Across the eastern coast of Asia, the sea changes constantly. Calm waters can transform into violent storms within hours, while powerful currents weave unseen paths between scattered islands and distant shores. Beneath the surface rests a landscape as complex as any found on land: submerged cliffs, hidden reefs, deep trenches, and the silent remains of ships that never completed their voyages. Somewhere within these waters, historians believe the remains of lost Mongol treasure fleets may still lie undisturbed. The story begins during the reign of Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan and founder of the Yuan dynasty in China. Kublai ruled one of the largest empires in history. Unlike the horse-mounted armies that had carried the Mongols across the Eurasian steppe, his ambitions increasingly turned toward the sea. Vast shipyards were established, experienced sailors recruited, and enormous fleets assembled to project imperial power across neighboring kingdoms and distant islands. These fleets carried far more than soldiers. Official records describe ships transporting weapons, horses, provisions, engineers, administrators, diplomats, and valuable cargo needed to sustain military campaigns far from the mainland. Gold, silver, silk, porcelain, official seals, tribute, and administrative documents likely traveled aboard many of these vessels, representing both material wealth and the authority of the empire itself. Some of those ships never returned. The most famous losses occurred during the Mongol invasions of Japan in 1274 and 1281. Contemporary Japanese sources describe powerful storms striking the invasion fleets, while later generations remembered these events through the famous term kamikaze, often translated as divine wind. Thousands of ships are believed to have been damaged, scattered, or destroyed as typhoons swept across the sea. Modern archaeology has confirmed that these accounts were not merely legend. Over the past several decades, underwater excavations near the coast of Japan have uncovered anchors, weapons, helmets, ceramics, ballast stones, and sections of ship hulls dating to the Mongol invasions. These discoveries provide compelling evidence that large numbers of vessels were indeed lost beneath the waves. Yet another mystery remains. What became of the ships carrying the empire's greatest wealth? Historical documents rarely provide detailed cargo inventories. Military expeditions required enormous logistical planning, but many official records have disappeared over the centuries. As a result, no one knows precisely which vessels transported valuable tribute, military payrolls, or imperial treasures. Some historians argue that stories of immense treasure fleets have been exaggerated by later imagination. They point out that military expeditions generally prioritized practical supplies over spectacular riches. Food, fresh water, weapons, spare equipment, and transport animals occupied valuable space aboard crowded ships. While precious goods undoubtedly accompanied certain expeditions, the image of entire fleets overflowing with gold may owe more to legend than surviving evidence. Even so, valuable cargo almost certainly existed. Imperial campaigns required significant financial resources. Diplomatic gifts, ceremonial objects, official tax revenues, and luxury goods traveled regularly throughout the Yuan Empire. Should even a fraction of these ships have sunk during violent storms, countless artifacts could still rest beneath layers of sediment on the seafloor. Oceanographers note that underwater conditions can sometimes preserve history remarkably well. In locations where oxygen levels remain low, wooden structures survive far longer than they would on land. Ceramics, coins, metal objects, and cargo containers may remain largely intact after centuries beneath the sea. Every newly discovered shipwreck demonstrates how much information can survive when protected by deep water and undisturbed sediments. These possibilities have inspired generations of exploration. Marine archaeologists continue to survey coastal waters using sonar imaging, remotely operated vehicles, and detailed seabed mapping. Each unusual shape detected beneath the ocean floor raises fresh hope that another section of the Mongol fleet has finally been found. Occasionally, discoveries justify that optimism. Fragments of ships reveal sophisticated construction methods that blended Chinese, Korean, and Mongol influences. Cargo recovered from wreck sites has expanded historians' understanding of medieval naval engineering, long-distance logistics, and the enormous scale of Kublai's maritime ambitions. Still, many questions remain unanswered. How many vessels actually sank? Which routes did they follow before the storms arrived? How much of the imperial fleet remains undiscovered beneath the sea? Over time, more speculative theories have naturally emerged. Some writers suggest that isolated ships survived the storms only to drift toward unfamiliar coastlines where survivors settled far from the empire they once served. Others imagine hidden wrecks containing untouched royal treasures resting within deep underwater valleys beyond the reach of modern exploration. Such ideas remain unproven. Yet they reflect a simple reality. Only a small percentage of the world's seabed has been examined in detail. Vast stretches of ocean remain as unexplored today as remote deserts or mountain ranges once were. Countless shipwrecks from every era undoubtedly await discovery. Their stories preserved beneath layers of sand, coral, and marine life. As waves continue to break across the coasts where Kublai's fleets once assembled, the sea offers few clues about what lies below. Somewhere beneath those shifting waters, fragments of an empire may still rest exactly where they fell more than 7 centuries ago. Whether they hold forgotten treasures, overlooked historical records, or simply the quiet testimony of sailors caught in forces beyond human control, the lost Mongol fleets remain one of the ocean's most enduring mysteries, waiting patiently beneath the tides for the next remarkable discovery. The mystery grows even deeper when the surviving historical records are compared with the archaeological evidence recovered from the seabed. While excavations have confirmed that many Mongol vessels were lost during the invasions, they also reveal a surprising level of complexity in the fleets themselves. They were not made up of identical ships. Instead, they represented an enormous maritime effort involving vessels built in different regions, each reflecting local traditions of shipbuilding and navigation. Some ships were designed to carry cavalry and supplies. Others transported soldiers, craftsmen, or government officials responsible for establishing order should the campaign succeed. This diversity illustrates the remarkable logistical challenge faced by the Yuan dynasty. Moving thousands of people across open water required careful planning, reliable coordination, and an immense investment of resources. Yet, even the best preparations could not control the sea. Modern climate research suggests that the waters surrounding Japan have long been vulnerable to powerful seasonal typhoons. These storms can develop with extraordinary speed, generating towering waves and violent winds capable of overwhelming even experienced sailors. Medieval fleets dependent on wooden hulls and sail power stood little chance against such forces once they were fully exposed. For many historians, these natural conditions provide the most convincing explanation for the disappearance of so many ships. Even so, important questions remain. Not every vessel involved in the campaigns has been located. Many wrecks are believed to lie buried beneath thick layers of sediment, while others may have broken apart and drifted far from the main disaster zones before finally sinking. Ocean currents have spent centuries reshaping the seabed, scattering timbers and cargo across vast distances. Finding a single wreck is difficult. Reconstructing an entire fleet is another challenge altogether. Among treasure hunters and maritime enthusiasts, the possibility of undiscovered cargo continues to inspire fascination. Coins minted during the Yuan dynasty, finely crafted porcelain, ceremonial objects, official documents sealed inside waterproof containers, and valuable trade goods have all been suggested as possible contents of ships that remain hidden beneath the sea. Most professional archaeologists, however, emphasize that the greatest treasure is not gold or silver. It is knowledge. Each recovered anchor, ceramic vessel, or section of hull adds another piece to the historical puzzle. Construction techniques reveal how medieval engineers solved complex problems of naval architecture. Everyday objects carried by sailors provide insight into life aboard long-distance expeditions. Even fragments of rope preserved in unusual underwater conditions can help researchers understand the practical realities of one of history's largest maritime operations. Technology continues to expand those possibilities. High-resolution sonar, autonomous underwater vehicles, and three-dimensional mapping systems now allow researchers to investigate areas once considered impossible to explore. Shipwrecks hidden beneath layers of sand can sometimes be detected through subtle variations in the seabed, revealing outlines invisible to divers above. Yet the ocean still guards its secrets carefully. Much of the seafloor remains unexplored, and every new discovery seems to reveal how much more has yet to be found. Perhaps that is why the lost Mongol treasure fleets continue to occupy such a unique place in historical imagination. They are neither entirely legendary nor fully understood. Their existence is supported by archaeology, their destruction recorded in historical sources, yet their complete story remains scattered beneath the waves. As the tide rises once again over the waters that witnessed those distant expeditions, the sea gives no indication of what lies below. Somewhere in the darkness, beneath coral, sediment, and centuries of silence, the final chapters of Kublai's maritime ambitions may still rest untouched. Whether they preserve forgotten cargo, overlooked evidence, or simply the quiet remains of ships overtaken by nature, they continue to remind us that some of history's greatest mysteries are not hidden by time alone, but by the depths of the ocean itself. As the echoes of our previous mystery slowly fade into silence, another forgotten chapter of history begins to emerge. One buried not beneath the earth alone, but beneath centuries of rumor, fear, and unanswered questions. Far from the crowded capitals of medieval Europe, hidden among the rugged mountains and ancient stone villages of southern France, lies a landscape where history and legend have become almost impossible to separate. The peaks of the Pyrenees rise like silent guardians over narrow valleys, their jagged silhouettes often disappearing into drifting clouds. Dense forests blanket the lower slopes, while weathered castles cling precariously to cliffs that seem almost impossible to reach. Even today, these fortresses appear suspended between earth and sky, as though they belong to another age entirely. Among them, none carries a more haunting reputation than the fortress of Montsegur, a ruined citadel standing high above the surrounding countryside. Its crumbling walls overlook miles of wilderness. And when morning mist gathers around its foundations, it becomes easy to imagine that the mountain itself is protecting secrets never meant to be uncovered. For centuries, Montsegur has been linked to one of medieval Europe's most mysterious religious communities, the Cathars. Flourishing during the 12th and early 13th centuries, the Cathars represented an alternative Christian movement whose beliefs sharply differed from those of the Catholic Church. They rejected many established doctrines, embraced a life of simplicity, and viewed the physical world as deeply flawed or even corrupt. Their spiritual leaders, known as the Perfects, lived lives of remarkable discipline, earning admiration from many ordinary people throughout the region of Languedoc. As their influence expanded, however, so did the concern of church authorities. What began as theological disagreement gradually transformed into military conflict. In 1209, the Albigensian Crusade was launched with the official purpose of eliminating Catharism. Over the following decades, entire towns were besieged. Thousands of people lost their lives, and one by one, the remaining Cathar strongholds fell under relentless pressure. Eventually, only Montsegur remained. Perched nearly 4,000 feet above sea level, the fortress became the final refuge for hundreds of Cathar believers. For months, royal forces surrounded the mountain, cutting off supplies while patiently waiting for surrender. Historical records describe a siege lasting almost 10 months before the defenders finally agreed to terms in March of 1244. Yet, it is during the final days before the fortress surrendered that one of history's greatest mysteries quietly begins. Several medieval accounts mention that shortly before Montsegur fell, a small group of Cathars escaped under cover of darkness. According to these reports, 4 individuals descended the nearly vertical cliffs carrying an unknown burden. They disappeared into the forests below, successfully avoiding the soldiers surrounding the mountain. No contemporary document clearly identifies what they carried. No inventory survives. No official record describes anything recovered after their escape. This single unexplained episode has fueled centuries of speculation. Some historians believe the fugitives simply carried the community's remaining wealth. Like many religious organizations of the time, the Cathars likely possessed donations, valuable manuscripts, and sacred objects accumulated over decades. Saving these possessions before surrender would have been a practical decision rather than an extraordinary one. Others suggest the escaped group transported important religious documents, texts containing Cathar teachings that church authorities intended to destroy. Such manuscripts, if preserved, might have safeguarded the movement's beliefs long after its physical communities disappeared. But as often happens when history leaves gaps, imagination begins filling the silence. By the late Middle Ages, rumors had already transformed the mysterious cargo into something far more remarkable. Some legends claimed the Cathars had protected the legendary Holy Grail itself. The Grail has appeared in countless traditions, often described as the cup used during the Last Supper or as an object possessing extraordinary spiritual significance. Medieval poets and storytellers frequently connected the Grail with hidden kingdoms, secret guardians, and chosen protectors. Over time, these literary traditions merged with local folklore surrounding Montsegur. The similarities were tempting. An isolated mountain fortress, a persecuted religious order, a mysterious nighttime escape carrying an unidentified treasure. For many writers, the pieces seemed almost too perfect to ignore. Modern historians generally caution against linking the Cathars directly to Grail legends. The earliest Grail stories appeared within literary romances rather than historical chronicles, and no reliable medieval evidence connects the Cathars with possession of such an artifact. Even so, the absence of evidence has done little to diminish public fascination. Instead, the mystery continued evolving. During the 19th century, renewed interest in medieval history inspired countless expeditions into the mountains surrounding Montsegur. Treasure hunters searched caves, abandoned tunnels, and forgotten ruins, convinced that priceless relics remained hidden somewhere beneath the rocky landscape. Some claimed to discover concealed chambers. Others reported finding unusual carvings etched into stone walls. Yet none produced convincing evidence of the legendary treasure. Archaeological investigations have certainly uncovered artifacts connected to daily life inside the fortress. Pottery fragments, tools, weapons, coins, and structural remains, but nothing suggesting the existence of a vast hidden hoard or sacred relic beyond ordinary historical expectations. Still, unusual stories continue to circulate. Local legends speak of underground passages stretching beneath the mountain leading toward caves concealed by centuries of erosion. Shepherds occasionally described hearing strange echoes emerging from the cliffs. Explorers reported narrow openings that appeared to descend deep into darkness before collapsing into impassable rockfalls. Whether these accounts describe natural geological formations or forgotten medieval structures remains uncertain. The region itself encourages mystery. The limestone mountains are filled with caves formed over millions of years by underground rivers. Some extend for miles beneath the surface, creating labyrinths that remain only partially explored even today. It is entirely possible that medieval refugees familiar with the terrain could have hidden valuable possessions in locations almost impossible to relocate generations later. Another theory shifts attention away from physical treasure altogether. Perhaps the true treasure was knowledge. The Cathars maintained beliefs considered dangerously heretical by the authorities of their time. If their final survivors successfully preserved certain writings, teachings, or spiritual traditions before Montseigor's fall, then their greatest legacy may never have been measured in gold or precious stones. Instead, it may have survived quietly through stories, symbols, and fragments of memory passed from one generation to another. Some researchers even point to similarities between later mystical traditions and certain reported Cathar ideas, though direct historical connections remain difficult to establish. Without surviving primary documents, separating influence from coincidence becomes an enormous challenge. Then there are the more unconventional interpretations. Some writers have proposed that the Cathars possessed knowledge inherited from far older civilizations. Others suggest connections with secret societies, hidden bloodlines, or esoteric wisdom preserved outside official history. These theories often combine fragments of genuine historical events with speculation, symbolism, and modern mythology. While they remain unsupported by reliable evidence, they continue attracting attention because they attempt to explain one enduring question. Why did those 4 individuals risk everything during the final hours before Montseigor surrendered? If they carried only ordinary possessions, why do so few records mention what became of them? If they protected something truly important, where did it ultimately disappear? Centuries have passed since smoke rose above the mountain following the fortress's surrender. The Cathar movement gradually vanished as an organized community, leaving behind only scattered records written largely by its opponents. Montseigor itself became a silent ruin, weathered by wind, snow, and time. Visitors who climb its steep paths today often describe an unusual atmosphere, not necessarily supernatural, but undeniably reflective. Standing among the broken walls, surrounded by endless mountains, it becomes easy to appreciate why so many legends have taken root here. History provides enough facts to establish the tragedy that occurred. The unanswered details provide everything else. Perhaps the missing treasure was hidden beneath stone and has simply escaped discovery for nearly 8 centuries. Perhaps it was quietly recovered long ago without entering the historical record. Or perhaps the greatest secret never consisted of gold, relics, or priceless artifacts at all, but of ideas considered so valuable that a handful of people willingly risked their lives to ensure they would survive beyond the walls of a doomed fortress. History is filled with treasures that vanished during moments of conflict. But what makes the Cathar mystery particularly compelling is not simply that something may have been lost. It is the remarkable absence of certainty. In an age when kingdoms carefully documented taxes, land ownership, and military campaigns, the final possessions of one of medieval Europe's most controversial religious communities seem to dissolve into silence. That silence has become fertile ground for centuries of investigation. Researchers have often returned to the surviving accounts of the siege, searching every surviving manuscript for overlooked details. Yet the records themselves present an immediate challenge. Most contemporary descriptions were written not by the Cathars but by those who sought to eliminate them. The victors preserved history while the voices of the defeated largely disappeared. As a result, historians are forced to reconstruct events from fragmented chronicles, legal documents, and reports that were often written with religious or political motives in mind. This raises an important question. If valuable objects were removed from Montseigor before its surrender, would the authorities have even known what they were searching for? Or did they recognize too late that something significant had slipped through their grasp? Some scholars have suggested that the escaped group may have followed ancient mountain trails known only to local inhabitants. The rugged terrain surrounding the fortress is far more complex than it first appears. Steep ravines, hidden valleys, and narrow passes weave through the Pyrenees like a natural maze. Even experienced travelers can lose their bearings when fog settles across the mountains, reducing visibility to only a few yards. In the 13th century, these conditions would have offered both danger and opportunity. A small group familiar with the landscape could move quietly through forests and rocky slopes while avoiding larger military patrols under the cover of darkness, carrying only what was absolutely necessary. They may have reached remote shelters before dawn ever revealed their path. But where would they have gone? One possibility points toward isolated cave systems scattered throughout the region. Archaeologists have confirmed that many of these natural caverns were used by people for thousands of years, serving as temporary refuges, places of worship, or secure storage during times of unrest. Some caves contain evidence of human activity stretching back to prehistoric times, while others remain only partially explored because of their immense size and complex underground passages. If the fugitive sought a location where valuable objects could remain untouched for generations, few places would have offered greater security. Yet, every expedition that has attempted to locate such a hiding place has faced the same problem. The mountains refuse to give up their secrets easily. Rockfalls regularly reshape entrances. Underground streams alter familiar routes. Entire chambers can become inaccessible over the course of centuries. A cache concealed during the Middle Ages might now lie behind tons of collapsed limestone, effectively erased from the visible landscape without ever being intentionally destroyed. Others believe the search has focused on the wrong destination altogether. Instead of remaining within southern France, perhaps the escaped Cathars continued their journey far beyond the Pyrenees. Trade routes connected the region with neighboring territories, allowing merchants, pilgrims, and refugees to travel surprisingly long distances despite the hardships of medieval life. If trusted supporters awaited them elsewhere, transporting important relics beyond the reach of pursuing authorities may have been entirely possible. This theory introduces another layer of mystery. No reliable historical record identifies the 4 individuals who escaped. Their names have been lost. Their destination remains unknown. Even their number, preserved in later chronicles, cannot be confirmed with complete certainty. They appear briefly in history before disappearing almost as suddenly as they emerged. It is difficult not to wonder whether this anonymity was intentional. Perhaps protecting the identity of those entrusted with the community's final mission was itself considered essential. As interest in the Cathars grew during the 19th and 20th centuries, new interpretations began appearing that reflected the changing interests of each generation. Romantic writers emphasized noble sacrifice. Archaeological enthusiasts searched for hidden chambers beneath ruined castles. Students of comparative religion explored possible connections between Cathar beliefs and other spiritual traditions across Europe and the Near East. Each investigation illuminated new aspects of medieval history while simultaneously creating fresh questions. As one forgotten treasure disappears into the mist-covered mountains of southern France, another mystery emerges hundreds of miles to the north, where rugged coastlines, ancient castles, and windswept highlands have guarded Scotland's secrets for centuries. Here, amid rolling hills veiled in fog and valleys carved by glaciers long before recorded history, the story of one of the nation's greatest kings becomes intertwined with an enduring legend, a treasure that may have vanished forever. The Scottish landscape possesses a quiet sense of permanence. Granite cliffs overlook restless seas, while ruined fortresses stand watch over rivers and forests that have changed remarkably little since the Middle Ages. Even today, there are places where silence settles so completely that it becomes easy to imagine armored riders appearing along distant trails or hidden messengers slipping between castle walls beneath the cover of darkness. It is within this timeless setting that the mystery of Robert the Bruce begins. Few figures occupy a more significant place in Scottish history than Robert I, better known as Robert the Bruce. Crowned King of Scotland in 1306, he led a determined campaign to secure Scottish independence during a period of prolonged conflict with England. His victory at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314 transformed not only his own legacy but the future of the Scottish kingdom itself. Through military strategy, political alliances, and years of perseverance, Robert the Bruce became one of medieval Europe's most celebrated rulers. Yet alongside the well-documented history of his reign exists another story, one far less certain. According to enduring tradition, Robert the Bruce possessed a considerable royal treasury accumulated through taxation, noble support, captured wealth, and valuable ceremonial objects associated with the Scottish crown. Such possessions would have represented far more than material riches. In the medieval world, royal treasures symbolized legitimacy, authority, and the continuity of the kingdom itself. But as wars intensified and political fortunes shifted, these treasures appear to fade from the historical record. What became of them remains one of Scotland's most intriguing unanswered questions. The circumstances surrounding Robert the Bruce's later years offer several possibilities. Although his military position strengthened after Bannockburn, Scotland remained vulnerable. English invasions continued. Noble loyalties shifted and internal conflicts constantly threatened the fragile stability of the kingdom. Protecting royal wealth during such uncertain times would have been a practical necessity. Some historians believe much of the treasury was simply spent maintaining armies, reinforcing castles, funding diplomatic missions, and rewarding loyal supporters required enormous financial resources. Medieval kings rarely accumulated wealth without eventually redistributing it to sustain their rule. From this perspective, there may never have been a single hidden treasure waiting to be discovered. Yet, historical gaps continue to invite other interpretations. Several medieval references suggest that valuable royal possessions disappeared during periods of political instability following Robert the Bruce's death in 1329. Although inventories survive for certain royal assets, they leave unanswered questions regarding ceremonial objects, precious metals, religious relics, and gifts presented to the king throughout his reign. The absence of detailed documentation has encouraged generations of speculation. One of the most enduring legends claims that portions of the royal treasury were deliberately concealed before they could fall into enemy hands. Rather than risk losing symbols of Scottish sovereignty during renewed conflict, trusted retainers may have hidden valuable objects within castles, monasteries, or remote locations known only to a select few. If such a decision were made, secrecy would have been essential. The fewer people who knew the hiding place, the greater the likelihood that the treasure would remain secure. Ironically, that same secrecy could also explain why it was never recovered. Over the centuries, numerous locations have been proposed as possible resting places for the lost treasure. Among the most frequently mentioned is Dunatar Castle, dramatically positioned atop towering cliffs overlooking the North Sea. Accessible only by a narrow strip of land, the fortress has long been associated with Scotland's royal history. During later conflicts, it famously safeguarded the honors of Scotland, the crown, sword, and scepter, from invading forces. Although no reliable evidence directly connects Robert the Bruce's treasure to Dunatar, its reputation as a place of refuge has naturally attracted speculation. Others point toward remote highland glens, where hidden caves and secluded valleys offered ideal concealment during medieval warfare. Scotland's mountainous terrain contains countless natural shelters, many known only to local communities or experienced travelers. Some remain difficult to access even with modern equipment, their entrances concealed by vegetation, rockfalls, or centuries of changing landscapes. The country's extensive network of medieval abbeys has also entered the discussion. Religious institutions frequently served as trusted custodians of valuable objects. Kings donated land, relics, manuscripts, and precious gifts to monasteries throughout their reigns. During times of danger, sacred buildings were sometimes viewed as safer repositories than military fortifications. Could members of the clergy have accepted royal treasures for safekeeping? If so, were they later dispersed, confiscated, or quietly forgotten as monasteries themselves faced dissolution centuries afterward? The historical record offers no definitive answer. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the mystery involves the possibility that the treasure was never intended to be recovered quickly at all. Certain historians have suggested that concealment plans during wartime often emphasized long-term security over immediate accessibility. A carefully hidden cache might remain untouched for years until political conditions stabilized. But if those entrusted with its location died unexpectedly, or if written instructions were destroyed, the hiding place could vanish from living memory within a single generation. History offers many examples where knowledge disappeared not through conspiracy but through simple circumstance. A messenger fails to arrive. A trusted guardian dies in battle. A document burns during a siege. A map quietly decays inside a forgotten chest. Sometimes extraordinary mysteries emerge from entirely ordinary events. Archaeological discoveries across Scotland continue to remind researchers how much remains concealed beneath the landscape. Medieval coins, weapons, jewelry, and ceremonial objects are still uncovered by chance during construction projects, agricultural work, and carefully supervised excavations. Each discovery demonstrates that centuries of human history remain preserved beneath fields, forests, and castle ruins. Yet, no find has conclusively resolved the legend surrounding Robert the Bruce's missing wealth. Modern technology has transformed the search in remarkable ways. Airborne laser scanning can reveal subtle traces of forgotten earthworks hidden beneath woodland canopies. Ground-penetrating radar allows archaeologists to examine buried structures without excavation. Geographic information systems enable researchers to reconstruct medieval travel routes and identify strategic locations that may once have held special significance. These tools have expanded historical understanding enormously. Still, they have not located a forgotten royal treasury. Not everyone believes such a treasure ever existed in the legendary form often imagined. Some scholars argue that later generations gradually combined separate historical events into a single narrative. Royal wealth undoubtedly existed. Valuable objects certainly changed hands and records were unquestionably lost over time. But transforming these facts into the story of one immense hidden fortune may reflect centuries of folklore rather than medieval reality. Others remain more cautious. They point out that absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence. Medieval documentation is notoriously incomplete, particularly during periods of war and political upheaval. Entire archives have vanished through fire, conflict, neglect, and the simple deterioration of fragile materials. What survives today represents only a fraction of what once existed. That uncertainty leaves room for possibilities that cannot yet be confirmed or dismissed. Perhaps the treasure lies beneath the foundations of a ruined castle whose stones have shifted for 700 years. Perhaps it rests within an undiscovered chamber sealed behind collapsed masonry. Or perhaps its individual pieces were unknowingly dispersed across Europe long ago, stripped of the stories that once gave them extraordinary significance. Visitors exploring Scotland's ancient castles often remark upon the remarkable atmosphere these places still possess. Wind whistles through broken towers. Ravens circle weathered battlements. Moss slowly overtakes staircases climbed by generations whose names have long since faded from memory. Standing among those ruins, it becomes easier to understand why legends endure. History tells us that Robert the Bruce fought to secure the future of a kingdom. Tradition suggests that somewhere along that struggle, something precious disappeared into the shadows of time. Whether that missing treasure consisted of royal gold, ceremonial regalia, sacred relics, or simply a story that grew larger with every passing century remains uncertain. And perhaps somewhere beneath Scotland's quiet hills, behind ancient stone walls, or hidden within landscapes that have watched over countless generations, the final answer has been waiting all along, silent, undisturbed, and known only to history itself. The mystery becomes even more intriguing when viewed through the broader history of medieval Scotland, where the line between documented events and enduring folklore is often remarkably thin. Castles changed hands through war and inheritance, monasteries rose and fell, and generations passed before many events were ever committed to parchment. In such an environment, the disappearance of a royal treasure is not only possible, it is surprisingly difficult to investigate with certainty. One detail that continues to capture the attention of historians is the movement of wealth during times of crisis. Medieval kingdoms rarely stored all of their valuables in a single location. Instead, coins, jewels, official seals, religious relics, and ceremonial objects were often distributed among trusted castles, noble households, and religious institutions. This system reduced the risk of losing everything in a single attack. But it also created a complicated network that could easily unravel during years of conflict. If Robert the Bruce anticipated renewed invasions or political instability, would he have ordered portions of the treasury to be divided among several secure locations? If so, perhaps there was never one lost treasure, but many smaller collections that gradually disappeared into history. This possibility helps explain why so many different regions of Scotland claim some connection to the legend. From the borders to the highlands, local traditions tell of hidden chambers beneath castle floors, forgotten tunnels leading into nearby hills, or iron-bound chests concealed within caves. In many villages, these stories have survived for centuries, passed from one generation to the next with only slight variations. While most lack historical documentation, they reveal something important about the way communities remember their past. Sometimes a legend persists because it reflects an event that truly occurred, even if the details have become distorted over time. One recurring story speaks of treasure hidden beneath ancient yew trees planted near medieval churches. Yews, with their extraordinary longevity, often outlive the buildings they stand beside. Some specimens growing in Scotland today are believed to be several hundred years old, while others may be even older. Their deep roots and enduring presence have naturally encouraged stories that they mark forgotten burial sites or concealed caches of wealth. Archaeologists generally approach such claims with caution. Ancient trees have inspired folklore throughout Europe and few have produced evidence of hidden royal treasures. Yet the symbolism remains striking. A tree capable of surviving for centuries seems an appropriate guardian for a secret intended to outlast those who buried it. Other theories focus on Scotland's many islands. Scattered across the country's western coastline are hundreds of islands, some inhabited, others little more than rocky outcrops rising from the sea. During the Middle Ages, these islands could provide remarkable isolation. Small monasteries, fortified towers, and hidden anchorages offered places where valuable objects might remain undisturbed for long periods. Could loyal supporters have transported royal possessions by sea rather than by land? The waterways of medieval Scotland often served as faster and safer routes than rough inland roads. A carefully planned journey along remote coastal passages might have allowed important cargo to disappear without leaving obvious traces. The sea itself, however, introduces another possibility. Throughout history, storms have claimed countless ships carrying valuable cargo. Medieval vessels faced unpredictable weather, hidden reefs, and powerful currents. If part of the royal treasury had been transported across Scottish waters, it is conceivable that some portion now rests beneath the seabed, preserved beneath layers of sand and sediment beyond the reach of written history. Although no evidence directly links such a shipwreck to Robert the Bruce's treasure, maritime archaeology has repeatedly demonstrated that remarkable discoveries can remain hidden underwater for centuries. If the silent ruins of Montsegur remind us that history's greatest treasures sometimes vanish into mountain shadows, our next mystery carries us far to the south, where the golden plains and winding rivers of West Africa conceal legends of unimaginable wealth. Here the mystery is not whether riches once existed, but where they disappeared, and whether they are still waiting beneath the earth. As dawn breaks over the broad floodplains of the Niger River, mist rises gently above the water before drifting across stretches of tall grass and ancient earth. Scattered among the landscape are the remains of forgotten settlements, weathered mosques built from sun-dried mud, and caravan routes that once connected kingdoms separated by thousands of miles. Today the region appears peaceful, but centuries ago it stood at the center of one of the wealthiest empires the medieval world had ever known. The Kingdom of Mali. Between the 13th and 15th centuries, Mali grew into an extraordinary center of trade, culture, and scholarship. Its influence stretched across much of West Africa, controlling valuable trade routes that carried gold, salt, ivory, copper, and countless other goods between the forests of the south and the cities bordering the Sahara. Merchants traveled for months across the desert, guided by stars and experience, linking distant civilizations through an intricate network of commerce. Gold formed the foundation of this prosperity. The mines of West Africa supplied an astonishing proportion of the world's known gold during the medieval period. Although exact figures remain uncertain, historians agree that Mali possessed immense mineral wealth, attracting traders from North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe alike. The empire's rulers accumulated considerable resources through taxation, commerce, and control of the trans-Saharan trade. No ruler symbolizes that prosperity more than Mansa Musa. Ascending the throne in the early 14th century, Mansa Musa became renowned not only for his political leadership, but also for the legendary pilgrimage he undertook to Mecca in 1324. Contemporary chroniclers describe an enormous caravan consisting of thousands of attendants, officials, servants, soldiers, and camels carrying substantial quantities of gold. Along the journey, generous gifts distributed in cities such as Cairo became so famous that later accounts claimed the sudden influx of gold temporarily affected local markets. While some details may have been exaggerated over time, the broader picture remains well supported by historical sources. Mali possessed extraordinary wealth. Yet, this wealth presents an enduring mystery. If so much gold passed through the empire over several centuries, where did it all go? Certainly, much of it entered international trade. Gold was exchanged for salt, textiles, books, horses, luxury goods, and countless everyday necessities. Coins were minted, ornaments crafted, and royal projects financed. Wealth circulated constantly rather than remaining locked away in a single location. Even so, many historians believe significant reserves must have existed. Large medieval kingdoms commonly maintained royal treasuries to finance armies, diplomacy, public construction, and periods of famine. Such reserves represented political stability as much as economic power. The rulers of Mali would almost certainly have safeguarded valuable stores of gold and other precious commodities. The difficulty lies in locating them. Unlike many European kingdoms, Mali left relatively few surviving written administrative records. Much of the empire's history survives through Arabic chroniclers, archaeological discoveries, and the remarkably rich oral traditions preserved by griots, professional historians and storytellers who passed historical knowledge from one generation to the next. These traditions preserve valuable insights. They also leave room for interpretation. Some accounts describe hidden royal storehouses established far from major population centers. Others speak of secret chambers constructed beneath important cities or isolated compounds where wealth could be protected during periods of political instability. Because oral traditions evolved across centuries, separating historical memory from symbolic storytelling is often impossible. The empire itself gradually entered a period of decline. Political divisions, shifting trade routes, environmental changes, and the growing influence of neighboring states reduced Mali's dominance over time. Important commercial centers that once flourished became less prominent, while new powers emerged across West Africa. As authority weakened, royal wealth may have been dispersed, relocated, captured, or quietly absorbed into regional economies. History offers several possibilities. Some treasures may simply have continued circulating through trade until their origins became impossible to trace. Others may have been seized during conflicts between rival kingdoms. Still others could have been deliberately concealed by rulers hoping to protect their wealth from advancing enemies. Among the locations most frequently associated with these mysteries is the ancient city of Niani, believed by many scholars to have served as one of Mali's capitals. Archaeological work has revealed evidence of extensive settlement, but the precise identification of medieval royal structures remains a subject of continuing research. Tropical vegetation, seasonal flooding, and centuries of continuous habitation complicate efforts to reconstruct the city's original appearance. Another important center is Timbuktu. Today remembered for its remarkable tradition of scholarship and its famous manuscript collections, Timbuktu also played a central role in regional trade. Although often associated with legendary wealth, historians emphasize that its greatest treasures may have been intellectual rather than material. Thousands of manuscripts preserved scientific observations, legal discussions, poetry, philosophy, astronomy, and theology, reflecting the city's extraordinary cultural significance. Even so, commercial prosperity ensured that valuable goods passed continually through its markets. This has encouraged speculation that hidden caches may still exist somewhere beneath old neighborhoods, abandoned caravan stations, or forgotten warehouses. Archaeologists approach such claims cautiously. To date, no verified discovery has revealed an enormous royal treasury belonging to the Kingdom of Mali. Excavations have uncovered ceramics, metalworking sites, trade goods, architectural remains, and everyday objects that illuminate medieval life, but no vast accumulation of gold comparable to later legends. Yet, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Large areas associated with medieval Mali remain only partially explored. Dense vegetation, changing river courses, and the sheer scale of the former empire present enormous logistical challenges. Many archaeological sites have never undergone systematic excavation, while others remain difficult to access because of environmental or security conditions. These realities leave room for careful speculation. Could concealed storehouses still lie beneath layers of earth near forgotten settlements? Might future excavations uncover royal compounds whose wealth was hidden before political collapse overtook the empire? Or has the legendary treasure gradually dispersed across centuries, transformed into coins, jewelry, architecture, and trade goods scattered throughout the medieval world? Some of the more imaginative theories suggest that immense vaults filled with gold remain hidden somewhere beyond the old caravan routes, protected by geography and forgotten by history. Others propose that trusted officials secretly divided royal reserves among several secure locations, ensuring that no single discovery could reveal the empire's full wealth. No convincing evidence supports these dramatic ideas. Nevertheless, they persist because they grow naturally from an undeniable historical truth. The Kingdom of Mali possessed extraordinary prosperity, and where extraordinary wealth exists, stories of hidden treasure are rarely far behind. As the sun slowly sets across the Niger River and the evening light turns the surrounding plains to shades of bronze and amber, the silence of the landscape conceals centuries of forgotten footsteps. Caravans no longer cross these routes in the numbers they once did, and the voices of merchants have long since faded into history. Yet somewhere beneath ancient settlements, forgotten royal compounds, or untouched layers of earth, fragments of Mali's remarkable past may still remain undiscovered. Whether they consist of buried gold, overlooked artifacts, or simply new evidence capable of reshaping our understanding of one of Africa's greatest empires, the mystery continues to invite one timeless question. How much of Mali's legendary wealth is truly lost? And how much is simply waiting to be found? The search for Mali's lost treasure has never been driven by legend alone. It has also been inspired by the remarkable achievements of an empire whose influence extended far beyond its borders. Every archaeological discovery, every translated manuscript, and every preserved oral tradition adds another piece to a historical picture that remains incomplete. One of the greatest challenges facing historians is that wealth rarely leaves a permanent trail. Gold is unlike stone monuments or ancient fortifications. It is melted, reshaped, traded, and reused across generations. A royal ornament may become a merchant's payment. A ceremonial object can be transformed into coins, jewelry, or decorative art centuries later. Even if vast quantities of gold once belonged to the rulers of Mali, much of it may no longer exist in its original form. This makes the search fundamentally different from the hunt for a lost city. Researchers are not necessarily looking for glittering vaults hidden beneath the earth. Instead, they search for evidence of administration, trade, and royal authority, foundations that might reveal how wealth was managed and where important reserves could have been stored. Archaeology has already begun answering some of these questions. Excavations across parts of the former empire have uncovered workshops where skilled craftsmen produced metal objects, imported ceramics that demonstrate long-distance trade, and architectural remains reflecting sophisticated urban planning. Together, these discoveries confirm that Mali was not merely rich in natural resources. It was supported by a complex economic system capable of sustaining prosperous cities and international commerce. Yet, every answer seems to introduce another mystery. Historical accounts written by travelers occasionally describe magnificent royal courts adorned with gold and elaborate ceremonial objects. Although such descriptions are generally considered credible in broad outline, determining the exact scale of that wealth remains difficult. Medieval writers sometimes emphasized extraordinary details to impress distant audiences, making careful comparison between multiple sources essential. Even so, the consistency of these accounts leaves little doubt that Mali possessed resources unlike almost any other kingdom of its time. Oral traditions provide another fascinating perspective. For centuries, griots carefully preserved the histories of royal families, battles, alliances, and remarkable rulers through spoken performance rather than written records. These traditions often emphasize wisdom, leadership, and moral lessons. But they also preserve memories of places whose exact locations have faded over time. Some stories speak of hidden royal compounds abandoned after periods of political unrest. Others mention sacred sites where rulers gathered before important decisions or where valuable possessions were entrusted to selected guardians. Historians approach these accounts with respect as cultural heritage while recognizing that oral traditions naturally evolve as they pass through generations. Even so, they occasionally guide researchers toward archaeological sites that might otherwise have remained unknown. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not where the treasure disappeared, but why so much of Mali's history itself became obscured. Unlike many medieval civilizations whose stone monuments dominate the landscape, much of Mali's architecture relied upon earth, timber, and other natural materials that require continual maintenance. Centuries of weather, shifting settlements, and changing river courses gradually altered the physical traces left behind by the empire. History, in this case, has been shaped as much by the environment as by human events. Today, modern archaeological techniques continue to reveal settlements hidden beneath vegetation, ancient trade routes visible only through aerial surveys, and forgotten occupation sites that had blended almost completely into the surrounding landscape. Each discovery demonstrates that the former kingdom of Mali still holds countless historical secrets beneath its soil. Whether one of those discoveries will ever include a royal treasury remains impossible to predict. Perhaps the legendary riches have long since been dispersed through centuries of trade and conquest. Perhaps they remain buried beneath the foundations of an ancient capital that has yet to be fully explored. Or perhaps the true treasure of Mali has never been its gold at all, but the remarkable civilization that transformed commerce, scholarship, and culture across West Africa while leaving a legacy that historians continue to uncover piece by piece. As twilight settles over the Niger River and the distant sounds of evening replace the bustle of medieval caravans, the landscape reveals little of the prosperity it once supported. Beneath its quiet fields and forgotten pathways, history still waits with remarkable patience. Somewhere below the surface, hidden not only by earth, but also by the passage of centuries, another fragment of the kingdom of Mali may still lie undisturbed, waiting for the moment when its story finally returns to the light. If the forgotten wealth of the kingdom of Mali reminds us that prosperity can vanish beneath layers of time, our next mystery leads north to a land of rugged mountains, ancient castles, and windswept moors. Here the treasure was not buried beneath desert sands or carried across distant trade routes. It belonged to a kingdom itself, and for more than a century it seemed to disappear without a trace. Perched high above the skyline of Edinburgh, an imposing fortress rises from a towering volcanic rock. Its weathered stone walls have witnessed royal coronations, fierce sieges, political intrigue, and centuries of shifting power. Mist often drifts across its battlements in the early morning, softening the outlines of its ancient towers, while below, the city slowly awakens beneath the shadow of Scotland's most iconic stronghold. Within these walls rested the honors of Scotland. The crown, the scepter, and the sword of state were more than ceremonial objects. They represented the sovereignty of the Scottish monarchy and centuries of national identity. Crafted from precious metals and adorned with jewels, they accompanied the coronation of Scottish rulers and appeared during moments of profound political importance. Their history stretches back to the late Middle Ages. The crown itself was extensively remodeled in the 16th century for King James V, while the scepter had earlier been presented as a papal gift. Together with the sword of state, these regalia formed one of the oldest surviving sets of crown jewels in the British Isles. For generations, they remained symbols of an independent kingdom. Then history changed. In 1603, James VI of Scotland inherited the English throne as James I of England, uniting the crowns under a single monarch. Although Scotland retained its own legal system and institutions, the royal court moved south to London. The honours of Scotland remained in Edinburgh Castle, appearing only during significant ceremonies. Their greatest trial came several decades later. During the 17th century, political upheaval swept across Britain. Civil wars, shifting alliances, and struggles between monarchy and parliament transformed the political landscape. When the forces of Oliver Cromwell advanced into Scotland in the early 1650s, concerns grew that the royal regalia might be captured. According to historical accounts, extraordinary efforts were made to protect them. The honours were removed from Edinburgh Castle and transported northward for safekeeping. Eventually, they found refuge within Dunatar Castle, an imposing fortress standing dramatically atop sea cliffs overlooking the North Sea. The choice was understandable. Dunatar's natural defences made it one of Scotland's most formidable strongholds. Steep cliffs surrounded much of the fortress, leaving only a narrow approach from the mainland. If any place could safeguard the kingdom's greatest symbols, it seemed to be here. But even Dunatar fell under siege. As Cromwell's forces tightened their grip, the defenders faced an impossible question. How could they prevent the regalia from falling into enemy hands? The answer became the beginning of a remarkable mystery. Historical tradition records that the honours were secretly removed from the besieged fortress before its surrender. Accounts differ in their details. Some describe the jewels being lowered down the cliffs under cover of darkness. Others tell of a courageous local woman named Christian Fletcher who is said to have smuggled them away concealed within bundles of flax or ordinary household goods. Whatever the exact method, the result appears consistent. When Cromwell's soldiers entered the castle, they failed to find Scotland's crown jewels. For years, their location remained a closely guarded secret. According to later records, the regalia were hidden beneath the floor of Kinneff Parish Church, carefully concealed until the political situation changed. Following the restoration of the monarchy in 1660, the honours were returned to Edinburgh Castle, where they once again became symbols of Scottish royal authority. Had the mystery ended there, it might simply have become another remarkable chapter in Scottish history. Instead, a second disappearance followed. After the Acts of Union in 1707 joined the kingdoms of Scotland and England into the Kingdom of Great Britain, the Scottish Parliament ceased to meet. Without regular state ceremonies requiring the honours, the regalia were placed inside a large oak chest within the Crown Room of Edinburgh Castle. The chest was locked. The room was sealed. Then over time, the jewels quietly faded from public memory. Decades passed. No official ceremonies required their use. Few people had reason to enter the locked chamber, and gradually uncertainty replaced certainty. Were the honours still inside? Had they been secretly moved elsewhere? Had they been lost, stolen, or even destroyed during the political upheavals of previous generations? Rumors flourished. Some claimed the jewels had been removed to London. Others believed they had been hidden in another undisclosed location to protect them from future conflicts. A few suggested that only replicas remained while the originals had disappeared forever. The sealed chamber itself became part of the legend. Behind its heavy door rested a mystery no one seemed willing, or perhaps authorized, to solve. For more than a century, speculation continued. Finally, in 1818, growing public curiosity led to an official investigation. the distinguished novelist Sir Walter Scott received permission to oversee the opening of the long-sealed Crown Room. Accompanied by military officers and government representatives, he entered the chamber and unlocked the ancient chest that had remained unopened for generations. Inside lay the honors of Scotland, the crown, the scepter, the sword of state. Carefully preserved, they had remained exactly where official records had indicated, hidden not by elaborate conspiracies, but by decades of neglect, uncertainty, and political change. Yet, even this dramatic rediscovery failed to answer every question. Historians continue to debate aspects of their earlier concealment during the Cromwellian invasion. Precisely how were the jewels removed from besieged Dunatar Castle? Which contemporary accounts can be trusted? How many individuals knew their true hiding place? Were additional documents, royal seals, or ceremonial objects concealed alongside them but never recovered? The surviving evidence leaves room for interpretation. Modern historians generally accept that Christian Fletcher played a significant role in preserving the honors, but the precise details of the operation remain uncertain. Different versions of the story emphasize different participants, routes, and methods of concealment. As with so many medieval and early modern mysteries, the most dramatic moments survive through a mixture of official documents, personal testimony, and later tradition. Today, visitors can view the honors of Scotland within Edinburgh Castle, no longer hidden from public sight. Their survival is itself extraordinary. Many royal regalia across Europe were melted down, dispersed, or destroyed during periods of revolution and political upheaval. Scotland's crown jewels endured because a small number of individuals accepted enormous personal risk to protect them. Yet their long disappearance continues to fascinate historians. Not because the treasure remains lost, but because its concealment reminds us how easily even the most important symbols of a nation can slip beyond history's immediate view. As evening fog gathers around Edinburgh Castle and the ancient fortress overlooks the city as it has for centuries, another quiet question lingers in the shadows. If Scotland's greatest royal treasures could remain hidden in plain sight for generations, what other remarkable relics of history may still rest undiscovered, waiting silently behind locked doors, beneath forgotten floors, or within places everyone believes have already surrendered their secrets? The rediscovery of the honors of Scotland in 1818 closed one chapter of the mystery, but it also opened another. Historians have often pointed out that remarkable discoveries rarely occur because of chance alone. They happen because someone continues asking questions long after everyone else assumes the answers have already been found. For more than 100 years, the oak chest inside Edinburgh Castle remained untouched. Its existence was known, yet uncertainty gradually overshadowed memory. As generations passed, first-hand knowledge disappeared. Officials changed, records became scattered, and stories evolved into rumors. What had once been carefully documented slowly transformed into one of Scotland's most enduring historical puzzles. It is a striking reminder of how fragile collective memory can be. The mystery also highlights the importance of ordinary individuals whose actions rarely dominate history books. Christian Fletcher, the minister's wife traditionally credited with helping rescue the regalia from Dunatar Castle, occupies a unique place in Scottish history. While some details surrounding her role remain debated, surviving evidence suggests that without the courage of a small circle of trusted people, the royal symbols might have fallen into enemy hands and shared the fate of countless treasures destroyed during periods of conflict. Their achievement was not merely the preservation of precious metal and gemstones. They safeguarded continuity. Every crown, scepter, and ceremonial sword carries symbolic meaning beyond its material value. They embody the traditions, ceremonies, and identity of the people who created them. Had the honors been lost, an irreplaceable connection to Scotland's medieval past would have disappeared alongside them. Even today, unanswered questions remain. Researchers continue examining correspondence, government records, and local archives in hopes of reconstructing the precise sequence of events during the Cromwellian invasion. Small inconsistencies between surviving accounts leave room for careful investigation. Which route did the rescuers actually take? How was the secret maintained so effectively? Were there additional participants whose names have faded from history? The answers may never be fully known. Perhaps that is why the story continues to resonate. Unlike myths built upon impossible claims, the disappearance of the Scottish crown jewels is rooted in documented history. The concealment was real. The uncertainty lasted for generations. The rediscovery astonished an entire nation. It serves as a reminder that history's greatest mysteries do not always involve objects that remain permanently lost. Sometimes they concern the extraordinary journeys those objects take before returning to the light. As twilight settles over the ancient stones of Edinburgh Castle and the wind moves quietly across its battlements, the Crown Room stands as a silent witness to centuries of secrecy. The jewels themselves are no longer hidden. Yet the full story of how they survived remains partly veiled by time. Somewhere within forgotten letters, overlooked archives, or details never committed to paper, fragments of that remarkable journey may still be waiting to emerge, proving once again that history rarely reveals all of its secrets at once.